So I'm going to start with the liquify one. So if you can go into session 8 in our class files, into the assignment folder. It's the very first one. It was the liquify assignment. I want to go through this process really quickly so that everybody sort of understands it. And if anybody has any questions about it, we can talk about that. And then we'll probably do a quick version of the green screen test as well. So if you can open up the first one. Okay, so my goal in this is to actually take something that has been deliberately distorted. Again, this is Comme des Garçons. The shape of this outfit is physically, this is actually what it really looks like. But I tried to come up with something that would not, that no one, I was trying to be as inoffensive as I can possibly be about liquefying, because in a sense, this becomes body modification, but the reality of this is it's really more clothing modification than it is anything else. So I'm hoping that everybody is comfortable with this and willing to do this. If you're having an issue with this, I understand that. We'll just soldier on. All right, so anyway, to start this out, the first thing I need to do is I need to separate the girl from the background. The problem that a lot of you, when you first started doing this, is as long as she is connected to that background, and when you start to do the liquefying to change its shape, you distort the background as well, and it's a dead giveaway. You take a look at it, especially because the background has got such straight line. The fabric has got lines that kind of run through it, and the minute you distort those lines, it becomes really obvious what you're doing. So the first goal in this is to actually split the girl away from the background. That's what I'm going to do. Anyway, so that's how we're going to go about doing it, the plan of attack. So it starts out with just making a regular copy of the background layer, Command J. And then we are going to separate the figure from the background. I'm going to use most of the AI tools to do this, especially with an image like this where the edges are as soft as they are. All of those tools work really well, and they're simply faster to work with. So that's going to be how I approach it. So to do it, I'm going to start off by selecting the subject. If you go up to your Select menu and come down to Select Subject, it'll take a second to run through it. Again, if you don't see this dialog box going up like that, there's a good chance that your image is not set to your select subject is set up to do it locally, as opposed to sending it up to the servers at Adobe to actually do the split. If you want to check to make sure that you do have your preference, at least, and it's my preference, when I do use select subject, I prefer to see what the Adobe servers do first before I try to do it on a local level. So if you go to the Photoshop menu, if you're on Macintosh, Photoshop menu down to Settings. If you're on Windows, you go the Edit menu down to Preferences. It will get you to the same place. So I'm going to do mine to Settings. And you want to actually do, what you're looking for is Image Processing. So open that panel up, and in the Image Processing, where it says Select Subject and Remove Background, there's a drop-down menu. This doesn't mean that you can't, no matter which one is picked, you can always do the other one as well to see which one works better, but it's just which one is the default. And so I set mine to the cloud as the default. And so then this image selection that I'm looking at right now is based on those Adobe servers, on the Adobe work. So I'm just going to jump this now to its own layer, Command J. So it puts it up on its own layer. If you want to see what it looks like by itself, hold down your Option key or your Alt key and click on the eyeball for it. It'll turn everybody else off. Now this tends to be a pretty sharp edge along here because of the way this has been selected, but that's not going to be a problem for me because this is going to go back on that same background. So it's not going to appear anywhere near as sharp on the final image as it does looking at it isolated right now. So with that done, you can turn off the eyeball for your figure and turn on the background, the layer that we actually just copied this from, the one that's in the middle. We are going to create a brand new background. And so what I want to do is on this layer here, again, my base layer, the background layer at the very bottom, I'm not touching, but this layer number 1, I'm actually going to double click on it and I'm going to rename this new background. And then I also need to select the subject again. So I'm going to come up to the select menu and I'm going to come down to select subject, and it'll run through the same pattern again. I get the marching ants again. However, if you actually then use AI or content aware fill or anything else to fix this part, the issue that we're going to run into is that the selection is too tight. The selection is running right along her figure. And so if I actually then do AI or content aware fill to actually get rid of the figure in here, the selection is too tight. It will not merge in with the background. You need to have some of the background actually selected in this. So to do that, I'm going to come up to the select menu and come down to modify and then down to expand. Now I'm going to put in a 10 pixel here because I know it's the wrong value, just to show you how you would then make it the correct one. So I'm just going to put in expand by 10 pixels and say okay to that. And you can see it comes out a little bit, but it doesn't really come out and grab enough of the background for me to get a successful blend of something, a successful blend that entirely removes the girl from the scene. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. It brings it all back in again, and then just go to that same place again, up to the select menu, down to modify, down to expand, and put in 20. And then say okay. And that looks good enough for me. So I like this part of it. That works. So we're going to try 2 versions of this to see which one we like better. I'm not going to do AI first. I'm actually going to try content aware fill first. So to do that, come up to your edit menu and come down to content aware fill. Now this has been in Photoshop for ages. So if you will actually come into a brand new workspace. In that new workspace, you will have a preview. This is what your image will look like using the current setups that we've actually got in here. We can modify those. So then in the image itself, you'll see that it's covered with this green. The green, what the green is telling you is the green is saying, this is what we are going to look at to actually recreate the background. So we are going to use any of the information that's underneath the green to actually do that. Now in our case, all of the green, all of the background is being selected here. So that part's fine. I can use all of it. You'll see that there's some holes in here that it's not selecting. If you want to add the holes, you've actually got a paintbrush and you can paint on that brush, on that area. But you'll see when you do paint on it, it actually reveals more. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, hold down your Option key and click, and then you can include something. So I also want to include the blue line that's down at the bottom, and I also want to include that dot that's on the edge. Now, if there was something that you did not want included, so let's say that the white sparkly sort of area that's on this canvas right here, if you did not want that to be part of it, then that's when you actually paint over this. And you'll see when you paint over that, the calculations recalculate here. So that didn't work out so well for me, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and you'll see it changes these guys up as well. Now also, in looking at this, when I included the 2 areas of the blue sort of like streak of light that's going along the bottom, it looks like it put 2 more up here into this area here. So I'm going to continue to go back in time, Command Option Z to go back, and it should open up those areas. And when it opens up those areas, the 2 blue lines, it looks like it's more continuous along the bottom, and it got rid of them at the top. So I do not want to get rid of these guys because I think that this is a better job of it. So this is where we're at. However, we're not finished yet. So to complete this, if you come over to the content aware property part, there are different ways that this thing can actually be sampled. So in the very beginning, there is an auto sample area. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. But underneath that, in the fill settings, you have color adaptation and rotation adaptation. So what color adaptation is it's actually looking at this and saying, okay, what does my background really look like and how can I blend this part in? There's a drop-down menu for this. If you click on this, you can actually turn it completely off. You can say none, and when it goes through that, you'll see the result of it here now. If you then come down to default, that's what you always see in the beginning. Decide which of those two you like better. You can go then to high, and in high, I actually think that's better than the first two. And then finally, very high. And very high, again, I don't like the way it's pulled in all of this green in this area in here. I don't like that part of it at all. So I'm going to go back to high on mine. And I think that that actually looks the best for this. However, then you can do rotation, and what rotation happens is that if you take a look at this, it's actually going to flip the colors in this space. So it's not going to line up exactly the way it is right here. You'll see what I'm talking about when you try it. So click on the rotation drop down and you can come down to low, and here it'll say, okay, using scale, mirror rotation, blah, 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 you can get unexpected results. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So I'm going to say okay to that. And then you'll see that there's a little wheel of spinning down here that's showing you it's actually doing the calculation. So you'll see this is starting to bring in some of the shadow of the figure again, and also a lot of that blue up in the top. So I'm not thrilled about the low rotation, so I'm going to try medium and say don't show this to me again. And that's not getting any better. I'll try high. Still not better. And full. I'm not liking any one of those. So I'm going to go back to none. And then in terms of the output here, you can click on this drop down and you can do it to a new layer, to a current layer, or to a duplicate layer. I'm just going to go ahead and do this to the current layer that I'm on. So I'm going to click on current layer and then simply hit OK. And you can now see, Command D to deselect, you can now see that this has created my new background. And if you turn your figure on, this is where the figure is on that background. And I would be fine with working with that part. So this is one way of doing it. I'm going to come over to my history panel and do a snapshot of that. So again, the history panel at the bottom, click on the little camera. A dialog box should open up. If it doesn't, you need to let me know. And we're going to call this content aware. Background. And I'm going to say OK to that. Now that I've got a history snapshot of that, it's right here at the very top. I can actually go back in history to where I did the content aware fill. So for me, it's 3 or 4 steps back where I just did the expand, because what that does is it brings the figure back onto my image right now. So this is now what my image is. I've still got the marching ants that have been expanded around it. So now I'm going to try the generative fill, the AI version of this. So to do that, with the marching ants still going, if your taskbar is not showing, the one that says generative fill right here, you have 2 options. The first one is that you can come up to the edit menu and you can come down and just pick generative fill from the menu. If you prefer to use the taskbar, then you come up to the window. If it's not showing, come up to the window menu, down to contextual taskbar, click on it, and this thing will open up. Either way, when you get there, you want to click on generative fill. It'll open up another place for you to actually enter a prompt. Now, because we're trying to remove this, we don't want to enter any prompt. We're just going to leave that part blank. However, if you look then to the right of that, there is a place, it looks like an image with a little arrow pointing in it. That's how we can load a reference image to this to use content aware. That's not going to help us. Usually that helps when you're working with a prompt, but that's not going to help us in this situation right now. However, to the right of that, if you click on that, these are the available models that you can use to actually do this AI work. So in doing this, if you click on that, you will see that at the very top there are the Adobe models. These are all available to us. However, the partner models that are sitting down underneath this are not available to us. The license that you are on and the license that I'm on is a gigantic group license for Columbia College, and they do not support these third-party models. However, that being said, when we get into doing the week that we spend really exploring this in AI, I've built a plugin that will allow you to actually use Gemini's Nano Banana, either version 2.5 or 3.0, to do this work outside of, it'll happen inside of Photoshop. So it doesn't work for either of the Flux models, but you will get, I will show you how to restore access to the other third-party models, which in my opinion actually are better than the Photoshop models, the Adobe models. However, the current Adobe model, the newest one, the one that's at the very top, this is the Firefly Fill and Expand model number 5. This has gotten significantly better. So I'm going to go ahead and say, make sure that you've clicked on number 5, the top one. It should be the one that's selected by default. If you don't have a number 5, if that didn't show up where it's called Fill and Expand, it means you're working on an older version of Photoshop. In order to get that, you're going to have to upgrade. And then just click on the Generate button all the way to the right. And it's going to go through and it's going to do its thing. And once it does that, up in your Properties panel, you will have 3 sets of variations, 3 changes that have actually happened to this. If you click on the first one, this is the one that's actually showing. So again, I'm working myself from left to right. I'm going to then click on the middle one. I hate the middle one. I'm going to then click on the one that's all the way to the right. I'm not really thrilled about that one either. I'm going to go back to the one that's in the very beginning. The one that's at the very beginning, the reason that I like this one better is that it has more of the big, larger areas of modeling than do the other 2 options that I've got. The one that I've got in the middle, and yours will be different. Yours will not look exactly like mine. There's just way too much action that's happening here in the middle. That does not look like canvas to me. And then this version over here, it carries too much of the figure that's also in here. I don't like that. So that's why I like this first one the best. However, it's not great, I don't think. So you can actually generate more variations. If you don't like anything, if you just like, well, I hate them all, then you just click on the Generate button again that's sitting right up in the Properties panel. But if you like one, if you think that one is actually stronger than the others, and I think the first one is stronger, hover over that thumbnail and click on the little 3 dots that are in the top right-hand corner. This will give you a flyout menu, and then in this flyout menu you can click on Generate Similar. And so what that will do is it's sort of acting as a reference image for you to generate again. You're saying, okay, well, I liked this one enough. So I'm going to click on Generate Similar. It's going to go through it again, and it's going to give you another 3 variations of this. And then I'm going to take a look at those. Again, the 3 so what's now happened is that the 3 original generative fills are underneath this, still running from left to right. The 3 new ones are now on top of this. So the first one is selected, looks horrible. It looks like some of the worst stuff that I've seen yet. I'm going to click on the middle one. It's slightly better, but I'm still not really crazy about it. And then finally click on the last one, and it's awful as well. So I am going to go back to my very first one. You guys get to pick whatever one that you think is the most successful. I'm going to click on that to get back to it. And this is the one that I'm actually going to use. However, you'll see that in doing this, if you take a look at your image, that the generative fill has actually got a layer mask on it, and the layer mask is actually based on the selection that we had in the middle. If you hold down your Shift key and click on that layer mask for the generative fill, you'll see the difference in here. So this is actually not changing a heck of a lot in here for me. So it doesn't matter. Regardless, what I'm going to do is I want to merge this together into my new background. So I'm going to leave the layer mask on, but you use the keyboard shortcut to merge your generative fill down into your new background. So to do that, you hit just Command E. and it will actually merge it down. So this is now my AI version of a new background. So I'm going to click again on my history state, the little thing that looks like a camera, and I'm going to call it AI, new background, and say OK. And then you can go up to the very top of your history palette. You'll see you've got both states right here, and you can click and go back to what the content aware fill version looked like, or down to what the AI version looked like. And for my money, the content aware fill one I like considerably better. There is a small repeating pattern that's happening right here in the middle, but if you turn on your figure is actually covering one of those repeating patterns, so it's not really going to be a problem to me. So this is how I'm going to go about doing it. I'm not going to use the AI version of this. I'm simply going to use my the content aware fill version of this. So at this stage of the game, I would save my work. So up to the file menu, down to save as. This opened as a JPEG, so you're going to get this warning that says the document cannot be saved as a JPEG without losing information. JPEGs can only contain a single layer. We've got 3 layers in here, so there'll be a compromise if I do that. I'm just going to say OK, because I don't want to save it as a JPEG anyway. I'm going to click on my drop-down menu for format and say I want to save this as a Photoshop file or as a TIFF file. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at Photoshop. I'm going to select my TOS folder, and I'm going to hit save. So this is getting me through the beginning part of it now. So I've got a clean new background. I'm going to leave my bottom background turned completely off. Now I'm going to work on the liquefy part of it. That's the last part that we're going to get to really quickly. So to do the liquefy part, it is a destructive move. You want to then make sure that you don't work destructively. So first we're going to turn this into a smart object. So with layer number 2, the top one, I can double click on it and call it body. The body we're actually going to turn on, select it to make it active, and then come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, convert to smart object. And now this is a smart object, so all the liquefy that I do on this will be a smart filter that I can turn on and off, that I can go in and work again and again on. I can amend it, I can do all of that. So with this thing turned into a smart object, I'm going to come up to the filter menu, down to liquefy. It brings me into the liquefy workspace. Typically, a lot of times it opens up the face options on the side. You can close those. This face aware liquefy, it takes up a huge amount of space, and we're not even going to use it. So you might as well just collapse it so that we can do the work that we're trying to do on this guy. So for me to go after this the first time, if you do not see your background, I'm going to, if all of you see is this on the figure on a transparent background, come to the bottom of your properties panel, and if there's a view options section that you can open up, in that view options sections that open up, you want to click on show background. And then in terms of how we're dealing with this, it's going to say, what do you want to use as the background? I'm going to click on my drop-down menu and say, I want to use the new background as my background. And then do you want that in front of the figure or behind it? I want it behind it. And then this opacity slider allows you to actually change the opacity of the image part that we're looking at. I'm going to keep that up at 100%. And then finally, now I can actually do the liquefying and see what I'm really doing. Now, if you were to make a mistake and leave on background as well, background, remember, that's the very base layer. That has got a copy of this figure that we are not going to change. And so if you have that enabled, when you try to do your liquefying, you'll see that you're making a change, but then it shows the unchanged image right underneath it, which is not going to help you out at all. So make sure that you have new background on. And then I'm going to grab the tool at the very top on the left-hand side. This is the forward warp tool. It's the tool that people use more often than not. So, and I've got, yeah, my, I have got an issue right here. My cursor is acting really spasmodically. It's like bouncing all over the place. So I'm having a problem with this. And again, whenever you are in Liquify, 9 times out of 10, if you're having a problem, it's because you've got your you're using the graphics processor of your video card. So really quickly, I'm going to cancel out of mine. If you're not having an issue, you don't need to cancel out of yours. To fix that, come up to, again, the settings menu, which is underneath the Photoshop part for Macintosh people. It's at the bottom of your edit menu for Windows people. We're going to go back into settings or preferences if you're on Windows, come down to performance, and then uncheck this use graphic processor and say OK. You need to remember to turn that back on, because the only time, not the only time this shows up, but the time this really shows up a lot is in the Liquify space. Otherwise, you want it turned on because it'll make your computer run faster in everything. It makes Photoshop faster. It makes anything that's graphic oriented faster. So Preview, Premiere, any of that stuff. So anyway, I'm going to now go back into Photoshop, back under Filter, back into Liquify. It's going to give me a warning to say that my hardware acceleration is turned off. I realize that I just turned it off, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then you'll see my screen redraw is long. It took a long time to do it, but at least my cursor now is working smoothly, and I can actually do the work I'm trying to do. So the way you use this tool is you want to use the biggest brushes that you can and the smallest movements and as many movements as you possibly can. So this is what you do not want to do. You do not want to click on this and drag this whole thing in. And you'll see I've got, again, the problem that I've got. I'm seeing a second figure behind mine. I don't really see my Liquify happening here. And that is because when I came back into this, it defaulted my show backdrop back to using all layers. I wanted to select and make sure that this is only the new background part. And so now when I'm actually using this tool, it'll actually work better. So this is working kind of good right here, but you'll see that at a certain point, this starts to look fake. And so I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm just going to tap in small areas of this part. And I'm going to continue to run my way up and down this body. I'm going to come up to the top and pull in the neck a little bit. But again, I'm doing small little taps and movements, small little taps and movements, small little taps and movements, and continue to work. Don't stay in one place too long. Because this way, it'll end up giving you something that looks considerably more natural. So that part's actually working for me right now. Now, if you look at the waistline in the back, there's some wrinkles and there's some bumps in there. And those things are actually okay to have because those are real. Those are actually from that's how the fabric was in the very beginning. So that's actually not a problem. However, if you want to get rid of these things, it gets a little bit challenging because you have to make your brush really, really small. You have to zoom in on this. And then you use your brush to actually push these things in. And again, really small motions, really easy like that. However, another option for this that makes it a little bit easier if you're trying to create a smooth line is to first off freeze this area that's right behind it. I'm going to freeze it first so that when I'm doing my movements against it, once it hits the frozen part of my image, it won't change. So to get to the freeze tool, it is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the 8th tool down. It looks like a paintbrush on a background. If you click on that and then come over to your image, you need to actually, if you click once, most of the time, the default of this is going to be that your mask is not showing. So if I click and drag, you will get this warning that comes up and it says, the show mask checkbox is preventing the preview from showing. Say, okay. It's this little item right here. This needs to be turned on. And if you turn it on, then you'll be able to spot the red freezing mark. So I'm simply going to click and I'm going to draw a line down here like this that will allow me to then control what I'm pushing up against. So once you hit this red line, no more liquefying can happen. The pixels will not actually move. So only the ones that are sitting outside that will move against this now. If you need to refine that selection just a little bit, so let's just say, oh, I made a mistake down here at the bottom, click on the tool that's right underneath it. This is the thaw tool, so that you can come in here like this and say, well, I didn't want that part to be frozen down there. So it allows you to modify this as much as you want. Then come up again to the forward warp tool, the tool that's at the very top, and now you can simply push this stuff in again, and you don't need to worry about your tool distorting the stuff that has actually been frozen. So this just allows me to bring that part in a little bit more. Now I want to get rid of the freezing part. I've done the work that I wanted to do. So if you look under the mask options, again, in the drop down, it's right above the view options. You can, if you open that up, you can click on none and it will actually get rid of it. So this looks a little rough to me. It doesn't look as smooth as I would like this to look. To fix that, you come down to the third tool down. It is the smooth tool. And in the smooth tool, you want to slow this tool down. So I'm going to take my pressure and bring it all the way down. I'm going to take my rate, and I'm not going to bring my rate down to 0, but I'm going to do it like at a 5. So this hopefully will actually happen pretty softly. So it should help take off the little bumps that are on here. So I'm simply going to run my tool up and down this edge right here, back and forth, and you can see it just knocked the little tips of those edges off a little bit. It actually smoothed that out. If this is going too slow for you, bring your pressure up a little bit. So I can bring my pressure up to like a 10 and see if that comes in a little quicker. It's not a whole lot quicker, so I'm going to bring my rate up as well. I'm going to crank that up to like a 13, somewhere in there, and then start to run back and forth here. And that'll actually bring parts of it back. It's a little bit smoother now. And then finally, I'm going to zip back out again. The bottom part is the last part that we really need to fix. So again, I'm going to go back to my forward warp tool, make it considerably larger. And then again, just start to work your way up, but don't stay in one place too long. So I'm working my way down. I don't want this whole waist area and above to change. It's actually been made correctly now. So before I continue this, I'm going to freeze that area. I'm going to click on the freeze tool. I'm going to turn on my show mask. It is turned on. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. And I'm going to freeze her waist and this whole upper part of her body. Now, I personally don't like working with the freeze actually showing, so you can uncheck this show mask. It's still there. It will still freeze this. It won't let stuff move, but you don't have to look at it. And then again, go back to my forward warp tool and continue to work my way in. So I'm going to bring down like this. I'm going to start to work on the sides. And you can see in my case, I'm getting a really serious lag because I've turned my graphics processor off. But, and typically what I would really do in that case, because this is a relatively new computer, I shouldn't be having that problem at all. I would simply restart my computer and turn off any other program that I might actually have on. So I'm going to continue to bring this part in here. So I have been doing this now with a density of a 51 on here. I'm going to bring my density up a little higher. It'll give me a little bit faster control from the outside. And I'm going to continue to push this part in. Make my brush a little bit smaller. And bring this down in here, a little bit larger. You can also use your push to the left tool. It's the one that's kind of in the middle. It looks like a set of checkerboards on the side with an arrow. If you click on that one, again, the way this tool works, I'm going to make it a little bit larger. If you start down at the bottom and click and drag up, it will push it in. But you can see that's really too extreme right now. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I need that to happen considerably slower. So I'm going to drop my pressure of this way down. and I'm going to leave my density about where it is in the mid 50s, and we'll try this again. I'm going to do a little bit bigger brush and then not get so on top of this. I'm going to stay closer to the edge of my brush and then click and push this up. And that actually makes for a little bit smoother line for me. So then finally, the last thing I want to do is I want to narrow down the front of this dress as well. So again, if we drag from the bottom and go up, it will make it wider. So instead, you do the opposite. We're going to click at the top and drag down. And again, I would go in and tweak this. I'm not really happy with what's going on at her waist right now, but you can sort of get some idea of how this is ultimately going. I'm just going to kick my way back out. You can use your preview check mark at the bottom to turn this on and off to see if it's giving you what you want. I'm going to say, sure, this looks great. I'll say okay. Then again, this is now a smart filter. So if I want to go in and continue to work on it, I simply need to double click on the liquify down at the very bottom. Double click on it. It will actually tell me again that my graphics processor is not on. Again, it goes back and it turns on all of the layers to be my background. You need to change that drop down to new background only so that you don't see the other figure. And then I could go in and fix the waist and do whatever I needed to do. Are we good on this part? Okay. We can cancel out of that. And I think right now would be a great time to take a break. So I've got 217. Let's make it a hard 10. Be back at 227. And we will jump into today. So I want to look at the green screen test thing really quickly. We're not going to do all the, we're not going to do everything to actually finish this image up. I just want to go kind of through the highlight parts of it all. So again, it's in the assignment folder for session number 8. It's called green screen test. If you can open that up into Photoshop. Oh, sorry, thanks. The green screen test, again, in assignment folder for session number 8. If you can open that up. So the knockout part in this is relatively simple. Well, I say that. But it brings up a number of challenges that we actually have in this. So I just want to make sure everybody understands the challenges and doesn't just do this on autopilot. So to do this, to do the knockout, I am going to use our 0 selective color action. So again, if you can get that image open, it's in the assignment folder of our week number 8, the green screen test. And then in your actions folder, you're looking for the 0 selective color action. Make sure that you select the parent, the very top of that action set, and not something, if you open it up, you do not want to start in here because you won't get the complete action. So just click on the 0 selective color top at the part, click on the arrow to run your action. Again, if like me, you end up with something that looks solarized instead of black, all you need to do is click on the absolute radio button and your image should go black. Everybody else's image should be black. And then I'm going to simply click on the greens for the drop-down menu, and I'm going to grab my slider, the black slider that's at the bottom that's all the way to the right, and I'm going to pull it back all the way to the left. Then I'm going to zoom in here on her hair. This is the part that I get the most worried about when we do this next move. So the next move is to actually use the hue saturation slider to make my green more green, and as it gets to be more green, or a purer green, more pure green, then my background will start to shift more to white. So to do that, click on the hue saturation layer that's underneath it. Click on the targeting adjustment tool. It's the little hand at the top right part of your properties panel that's got the arrow that points both left and right. It turns into an eyedropper when you come over to your image. click and drag it towards the right, and what you'll see that starts to happen is the background starts to get lighter. However, I have a problem with this. If you zoom in on the hair, you can actually see, I'm looking at the hair specifically on the right hand side. Some of this hair has already gone lighter than the background, especially the stuff up at the top. That's not going to work for me. If I actually go ahead and use this stuff, all of that will get to be white before my background will get to be white. So that's not a good option for me. I'm going to click this and take it back. Again, I still have the same targeting adjustment tool selected. I'm just going to click on this and I'm going to push it back to the left now. I'm removing some of that saturation that I added. And again, what I'm looking for is the whole edge quality of this hair that's running along this. So I'm still coming down to try to bring back most of those edge quality parts in here. And what you realize is that 0, pretty much no saturation move at all, is keeping this hair in the best way it can be. So again, just because you can boost that background up does not mean that's what you want to do. If we come over to the other side of her hair, you can see the same effect that's happening down here. I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to click and drag this up, and you can see that it starts to actually really fracture the hair. Look at how bad this area in here gets. This will never, ever, ever look correct. So I'm going to click and drag this all the way back down. And again, I realize that I'm getting, as I get closer to 0 for my saturation move, the better off that I am on this. And I'm okay with that because I can still use levels to fix this part. So then to come over to my channels palette, all you need to do is copy either the red, green, or blue channel. They're all the same because this is a black and white image right now. So I'm just going to grab the blue channel, drag it down onto the square with the little plus in the middle, double click on the name, and I'm going to call it Knockout. And then my selective color adjustment layers, they've done everything they can do. I don't need them anymore. You can throw them both away. Again, this is all about management, layer management, channel management. So I'm going to then go back over to my knockout channel, the one that I've labeled. I'm going to click on the entire thing, which will turn on its eyeball, and select it. I do have a black and white image now. I'm going to just zip out here a little bit. I am going to now, I want to actually make this background white. Again, most of my image is black, not all of it is, but most of my image is black. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper tool, fly up menu, and my tool palette on the left-hand side, come down to color sampler, and then I'm simply going to click on the background to throw down a color sampler. I've got some other color sampler that's already on here someplace. I don't know where it is. I don't know what it is. So instead of doing this, I'm going to hit clear all at the very top in my options bar. That gets rid of all of your color samplers, and then I'm going to simply add another one from scratch. So this is my number 1 sampler that's in the middle of this background. Then if you take a look at her chest, you'll actually see there is a necklace that was on her chest that's actually got tone in it. As a matter of fact, if you zoom around, you can see that there's other tones in other places as well. If you come down and take a look at the right-hand side of her sleeve, I'm not seeing anything in there right now, but I do see the pearls, or the whatever the necklace is. So I'm going to come back to that necklace area. That's something else that's in here. Oh yeah, I've got something. If you look down sort of right above her crotch, you'll actually see there's a whole area of fabric in there that's also showing up. So I think that the necklace has actually got more tone in it. So I'm going to go back to the necklace, and I'm going to drop something on the lightest part of my necklace right here. So that's something that I actually need to get to go to black. So I've got my 2 tonal points that are in my info palette. I'm going to click on the eyedropper for each respective one. I'm going to start with my point number 1. Just click on the eyedropper and say, show this to me in RGB color. I'm going to do the very same thing for my point number 2. Show this to me in RGB color. And then I'm going to run levels on this, Command L. In the levels dialog box, I'm going to go after the white point first. That's my number 1 point here. That's the background that I want to actually make white. I'm going to grab the white point underneath my histogram and start to drag that towards the middle. and bring it all the way back down. And again, I'm looking to get close to 255 here is my after for my point number 1. I'm going to stop short of that. I'm at a 252 and go to my arrow keys and tap this in one at a time just so that you get the absolute minimum to get to 255. You'll notice now that that's actually really opened up the pearls parts as well. So those are like really cranked now. I'm going to grab my black point slider and I'm going to drag it to the sort of towards the center. I'm going to get close again to 0, stop. I'm at 6 right now. To go to my arrow keys, tap a couple of times to bring it in. Recheck your white point slider to make sure that that hasn't changed. And then I'm going to back out of this. I want to take a look and see again specifically what is happening to the hair on this side. So I'm going to use my preview check mark at the very top and I'm going to turn this on and off to see what's actually happening to the hair. And I'm sort of okay with that. I'm feeling like in many ways my white point is too aggressive. I'm worried about this piece of hair that's right in here, that it's really just getting completely nuked out. It's blowing out too much. So I'm going to back my white point slider off a little bit. It should return a little something to this. Another thing you can try here, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. You can actually use the center point slider in between. So we haven't talked about this guy yet. It's the the middle gray that's between your white point and your black point. You can actually adjust that as well. You can see if you take it towards the black side, everything gets lighter. If you push it in the other direction, things get a little bit darker. And I feel like I'm picking up a little bit more tone in that. And I think I would rather do that than back my entire white point slider off. So I'm going to zip back out again before I say okay to this and check like the top of her head here. Again, use your preview on and off to see what it is you're keeping, what it is you're losing. Look at this part down in here. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this part. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. However, I've already spotted a problem in here. If you come down to the area that's right between her legs, you'll actually see there's contamination in this background. The area that's right between her ankles, that's actually still got quite a bit of tone in it, but there's no reason that you can't run levels again. And this time we don't necessarily have to go after the shadow part. So I'm going to run levels on this again. I'm going to actually put another color sampler point right down here between her legs. So I'm going to click on the color sampler tool, drop a point right in the middle. This gives me a point number 3. I'm going to change its eyedropper to RGB, and then it's reading a 250. So again, Command L to bring up my levels dialog box. It's easier to do this using levels than it is using the overlay brush. Overlay brush is just too much work. This is a global thing. So I'm going to grab my white point slider and start to drag back. And it still has not cleaned all of this area out. So I'm going to hit cancel out of here really quickly just to talk about something else in here. We've got a 3x3 average point sample in this right now, and it's not big enough. I'm actually, I'm worried about if I'm going to make it bigger, but I'm worried about it grabbing some of the information in her legs. I don't want that. So I'm going to grab this point slider and I'm going to bring it out here to an area that's a little bit safer out here. And then I'm going to boost my point sample up. I'm going to bring it up to like an 11 by 11. And you can see you pick up a little bit more tone. It's just looking at a bigger area and averaging that bigger area. So then again, Command L to bring up my levels dialog dialog box. Start to crank this back until I get to 250 or close to 250. Go after this with my arrow keys and say okay to that. And then just take a look around in here. You can use your cursor to run over this area right in here, and you can see I'm getting, for the most part, most of this. There's an occasional 254 that I'm seeing in here, so I'm going to hit my arrow key down one more time and then kind of run around here a little bit more. And I'm staying pretty much with all of these 255s now. So I feel like I've gotten that pretty cleaned out. Again, before I say okay to that, I'm going to go see what I just did to all the hair. So again, up here at the very top, use your preview check mark to turn it on and off. Yeah, and I'm not seeing any shift in the hair. So I'm gonna go ahead and say okay to that. So then the last thing that I would do on this, and then we'll just see what it looks like. If you come down here to the area that's by her feet, there's clearly a problem down in here. I'm still seeing the floor. So I am gonna do this with my overlay brush. Hit the B key to get a brush and change the blending mode down to overlay. I'm gonna make this a medium hard brush. 100% opacity, 100% flow. White is my foreground color, so as I start to paint in this area right in here, you can see that it respects the shoes. It's not actually changing them because they're already dark. As you start to run your way across the front of her shoe, you can see it's not impacting the shoe, but it is cleaning up the floor. However, I've got darker areas on here that have not gone to white. You can use this tool repeatedly to hit it a couple of times to actually get it to clean out, and then figure that part out and go after this part. And then finally I'm going to go after her other shoe. When I come up on the other side of her other shoe, you can see that there's a small little part right underneath this edge of her shoe that is not black. So I'm going to just hit the X key to make black my foreground color and then paint along that line, and it takes care of that. And then I would go after the rest of this image. Again, use the overlay tool to go underneath the fur to do all of that. A regular brush, we can actually do a regular brush right now just so that you can see it. B key, change it to a normal brush. Make sure it's a completely hard brush. Much larger. And then get rid of the whole studio that's on the side. Just paint this out. Get rid of most of the floor. Get rid of the other side. Again, I'm not going to spend all day cleaning this up, but nonetheless, that's where we're at with this right now. Well, we can almost finish this up. Go back to an overlay brush and just run it along the side. If you zoom in on this, you'll see that there's still stain like on the floor. Just hit it a second time. And one more pop up there. And this looks pretty good. I do have contamination on the other side. I can spot it right here. So I'm going to go to a completely soft brush. It still is an overlay brush. And just clean up that area that's sitting right on top of the fur. And then to see what this looks like, I'm going to come over to my layers palette, Command J to make a copy of my layer. Click on the background layer because I want to put a new white background in between these two. So I'm going to click on my background layer, and then I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a solid color adjustment layer. With the solid color, the color picker box will actually open up. You can use your eyedropper tool from the color picker to just select. My background color is white, so it's just an easy way for me to get to that white and say okay. Otherwise, tap in 255 red, 255 green, and 255 blue and say okay to that. And then I'm going to come back down to my knockout, and if you click on your knockout, you'll see that this is exactly the opposite of what it should be. It's black, so it's actually hiding the figure and showing the background. You need to invert this, Command I. Then hover over the thumbnail and hold down your Command key and click to load that as a selection. And then back over to the top layer of the figure, the one that's above the white background, and simply add this as a layer mask. Double click on the hand and let's see what we did. If you zoom in here really quickly to the figure, the hair is actually looking pretty good here. I do have spill in the hair, so we're going to fix the spill right now. We're not going to do all of it, but we're going to do a little bit of it just to finish all of this up. I'm going to click on my pixel layer because that is where the spill actually is. That's where I need to fix it. Again, I've got the virgin that's sitting all the way down at the bottom, so I can be destructive on this layer that I'm talking about. I'm going to hit the B key again to get a brush. I'm going to change the brush to make sure it's a completely soft brush. I'm going to change the blending mode from overlay down to color. Make my brush smaller. And then I'm going to hover over the color of her hair to sample because I need my foreground color to be the color of her hair to remove this spill. So I'm going to hold down my Option key and click once that will actually give me a color sample, but I'm not getting the heads up display. I have not turned on my graphics processor again since I turned it off in our Liquify. So I'm going to do that right now, up to the Photoshop, down to settings, down to performance, and turn on use graphic processor again. And then hopefully this will actually give me a heads up preview, but I'm still not getting it. It is sampling the color. I'm seeing my foreground colors changing. So this part's working well enough for me. And then I'm simply going to only touch the hair that I actually want to change the color of. And so on and so on and so on. So the last thing that I need to do is, if you come down and you take a look at her right hand, you will actually see that we have that dreaded black. No, it's not a black line. It's a contrast move that all processors do. And so what's happening, the reason I'm still seeing this green line right along the edge of her, is that there was a contrast move that was made on that line in the actual green screen image. If you hold down your shift key and you click on the layer mask, you'll see there's a dark line that's running right down here. It's a contrast move, but it makes the green here darker than the background green is, than the rest of the green is. So even though I managed to actually get the rest of the green background in my mask, I'm not getting that line that runs along her hand. So hold down your shift key and click on the layer mask again to see it. So I need to choke this part. So to choke this, I'm going to come over to my history palette, click on it. I'm going to then click on the little icon at the bottom of the camera to create a history state of what this image looks like before I choke it. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to call this history state pre-choke and say OK. And then if you look at the very top of your history panel, you'll see there's a state up there called pre-choke. That's great. I'm going to come back down to the bottom. Then I'm going to go ahead and choke this thing. So you need to select the mask itself, because again, what we're doing now is we are refining the mask. If you hold down the Option key and click on your mask, you can see this is what my mask looks like. I need to choke it in. I need to bring it in to hide that line. That's what I'm trying to do here. So again, hold down your Option key and click on the layer mask again to turn everybody else back on. So to choke this thing, the first move is to actually blur it. You need to introduce shades of gray between the black part of your mask and the white part of your mask. Up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And I've got a blur of 2 in here, and it's right. I mean, I've done this, actually I did this exercise earlier today. If you back your radius off on this blur to a 1, you'll see I'm not getting we're actually making the problem worse. We're making this line actually worse before we make it better. But 1 is not giving me enough shades of gray in between. So I'm going to take it up to a 2, and I think a 2 will work for me on this. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then again, I've made the problem worse, but if you hold down your Option key and you take a look at this, you'll see I've got shades of gray in between the black and the white now, so that when I actually run levels on this, I can say I want those shades of gray to be black, which will be a choke. So again, Command L to bring up the levels dialog box, grab the black slider and start to take it towards the middle, and you'll see it starts to shrink in. Now, if you feel like the edge of her hand is too soft, it might be just a little bit too soft, you can actually grab your white point slider and actually push that towards the center, and it will sharpen that line up just a little bit more. And this looks good to me, so I'm going to say OK to that. And then immediately do another history snapshot. So click on the little camera at the bottom of your history palette and call this post choke. And say OK. And then you can go back in history before we did the choke. You'll see there's only 2 history states that we need to go back. When I had this enable layer mask history state back here, it falls before. So I'm going to go back 1 step before I did the Gaussian blur. So I'm simply going to click back here. It brings all of that back. But at the very top of my history palette, I have a history state of what this image looked like when I choked it, so I can use the history brush to paint with that state. So you do not want to select the post-choke state. You simply want to click on the little box to the left of it, and this, now you're saying this is what your image, that when I use the history brush, it is going to return my image to what it looked like when this state was in effect, and that was in once this image had been choked. So now I'm going to grab my history brush. It is the brush right underneath the clone stamp tool. I'm going to check on it. I'm going to make it about a 50% hardness, although you don't really need to worry about hardness too much until you reach an area where you do not want to actually paint back into this previous state. So I'm going to leave it at 50% hardness, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then simply come over your image and paint. And all you need to make sure you're on your layer mask, because that's what we're changing, is the layer mask. But this just gets rid of the whole part that we need to be choked. And I can just paint. You don't need to be really careful about this. Again, the history is controlling where it is. So I would run this all the way up her sleeve. Her sleeve needs to be choked. The other side of her sleeve needs to be choked. There's actually quite a bit. What you don't want to choke, the reason that we've gone to all of this problem, is the hair. Look at this. If we actually come across the hair, I'm going to make my brush even bigger, it destroys the hair. That is not what you want to do. That's why we're using these history states, so that I can paint some places that should be choked and some places that should not be choked. And finally, if you do make a mistake like this, you've got the pre-choke history state. You can go back up to it, put the check mark or the box, click on the put the icon in the little box to the left of the pre-choke state, and now my history will paint with what my image looked like in the pre-choke, which will return all of the hair. And any questions about any of this? Boom, you can close this up. You do not need to save that. So then on to what we are going to talk about today. I need you to go to your class number 10 files. The two things that we're going to try to get into today is we're going to do puppet warping and complex shadows. So I think we're in good shape right now. If you go into your session 10, week number 10 folders, there is a folder inside here called Puppet Warp. If you would click on your Puppet Warp and open this up, inside that there is a Puppet Warp figure.psd. If you can open that up by itself into Photoshop. So when I open mine up, I've actually got some garbage that's sitting down at the very bottom of mine right here. It's part of a floor, I think. I'm not really sure what's in there. I want to fix that part really quickly, so let me find out exactly where it is. Yeah, we can take care of it. It's in one of these. There's a lot of, I've got a whole group that's called Figure. It's in here someplace. However, if you don't want to actually go looking for it, we can just put a layer mask on the figure. It's on the figure group itself. So I'm going to collapse the figure. As a matter of fact, this is a good way. We should talk about this right now. The problem, I can see it's right here on the green screen mask. It's sitting right here. I can see it under this mask right here. However, let's say that you didn't want to change this layer mask at all, that for some reason you wanted to keep it exactly the way it was. We can do what's called nested masking. So I'm going to leave this mask unchanged. I'm going to come up to the top and collapse my figure. And inside the figure group, I'm going to put, on the figure group itself, I'm going to add another layer mask. So again, just click on add a blank layer mask. It comes up on the top. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, make it a smaller brush. Hit the D key to default your foreground and background colors to black and white. Hit the X key in my case to make black my foreground color, and then simply paint over all of that. And paint over all of the one that's on the other side as well. I do have a couple of shadows that are on this one that I don't want. They're sitting right underneath this. they are actually all turned off. So it might be somewhere in my figure set. So I'm going to open up the figure set again and see if I've got any shadows in here at all. And I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this right where it is right now. So I'm going to collapse this again, and I'm going to turn my entire figure into a smart object. So if you do that, so again, click on the entire figure group layer, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert this to a smart object. And you'll see your figure shows up on a transparent background. If you turn off the white background layer now, you'll see that that's exactly what you've got. You've got a figure that's sitting on a white background that is completely isolated and nothing else. And when you're using Puppet Warp, this is how you want to work. One of the best things about spending all the time that we spent trying to build these selections is that Puppet Warp, it really is complicated if you try to do it with a background, and you'll see why. I'll explain why it is in just a second. But does everybody basically have this figure on a transparent background? Because if you don't, you can't do anything else we're going to do today. Are we all good? Yep. Okay. So this is a smart object, so the work that I do on here will be non-destructive. Puppet warping is a transform tool, so I'm going to make my image a little bit smaller. To get to it, you come up to the edit menu and you come down to Puppet Warp. It's in the whole, it's right above the whole transform group, or it's a part of the whole transform group. So when you click on it, you'll actually go into its own space. So I've still got, actually I take that back. We're not in its own space. We are actually, it'll appear to be a different space when we go ahead and apply it. But nonetheless, to go along the very top, we need to talk about what these are at the very beginning. Actually, I take that back. Before I get to the very beginning, I want to show you partly of what it is and how we use it, and then I'll explain the differences of the options that are up in the options bar. However, there is one in the middle of the options bar that says Show Mesh. If you click on that, you will see that this girl gets covered with, I always refer to it as a spider web. This is actually how the Puppet Warp tool works. It is a transform tool, but unlike Liquify, what this does is that the entire image is interconnected. And so when I go to actually make a Puppet Warp move, when I change something, it's going to change the entirety of the image because this image is connected by this spider web. However, if you want the best, most detailed control, you need to use a finer spider web. To do that, you click on the density slider drop-down. This density drop-down, it says normal to begin with. You come down and you say more points, and you'll see that the mesh itself gets much more complicated. And that actually helps us. We can do far more nuanced puppet warping with this. The downside to this is that it's much more processor intensive. So if you have a slower computer, you can hopefully get away with normal. If you have a really slow computer, you actually may have to go to fewer points. And again, if you go to fewer points, you'll see that my spider web is considerably more open. And it gives me, it's not that I can't control the whole image, I can, but it's just the nuance of my control is diminished. So I am going to go back to more points. The thing with this is, and the reason I'm bringing it up now, is that you want to set this density at the very beginning. Because if you start laying down points and start to do your puppet warping and then you change the density, it will completely change your transform. So all the nuanced work that you've done will get shifted. Not that it will be wrong, or it'll just get shifted because you've got a whole different mesh that's actually on top of the figure. So I typically start with more points. I also don't like to see the mesh. It's not like we're trying to hit anything on the mesh. We're not trying to hit intersections when we use this thing. So I'm going to turn off the check mark for show mesh. It's just easier to see the figure when I don't have that turned on. And then finally, I'm going to come down with my cursor and I'm going to click on a point right in the middle of her arm where I think her elbow would be. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend her arm. I'm going to give her an elbow. I'm going to take her arm, instead of it being straight, I'm going to bend it so that her hand is touching her dress, or her skirt. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click and drop a point down right in the very middle of her arm, where I think her elbow about will be. And you'll see, it turns out it's a little white dot with a blue circle in the middle. That is considered, they talk about this as pinning. So basically, if you think of this as a push pin, that we have just taken a push pin and shoved it through this girl onto essentially a frame, a background that's back behind this, even though mine is transparent, that it's actually anchored it to my art board here. And it will not move now. Then if I come over to her so I'm now on the right side of her hand, I'm going to click on her wrist, a point, and I'm going to put a point right in her wrist on the other side. Now you'll see when you do that this then becomes the white circle with the blue dot in the middle, and the original one on the other side is still a white circle, but that blue has gone to a very light gray right now. That's telling you that this is not going to be able to move. I am going to be able to move the point that is in her hand on the right hand side that's got the blue dot in it. If you click on that and then actually move clockwise, you will see what I mean about the transform. Because she is completely enshrined in this mesh, I've got one point on the left side that cannot move, so everything is rotating around that, but everything is moving. Her feet are moving, everything is moving, because the mesh is completely connected to her entire body. Is this making sense to everyone? All right, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that part. We can now actually talk about a couple of things that are up here at the very top. If you look at mode up here in the top, you will see that you have got rigid, normal, and distort. Rigid tends to be almost robotic in how this thing moves, so it's not as organic. And in terms of doing these motions, you tend to want them to be more organic. And then if you click on the other mode here, distorted, what distorted will do is exactly what it says. If we go to actually do a movement in here, it will do really weird shit. It will make her thigh giant and her shin really, really, really small, or her eyeballs gigantic and her lips really, and there's no control about it. It's just whatever is written into the algorithm. So I don't know anybody who uses distort at all. 99.9% of the time you will be leaving this in the mode into as normal. And then the expansion part, if you turn on your show mesh again, you will see that the spiderweb actually extends beyond her. It goes a little bit past the edge of her body. That's what this expansion is. If you change the expansion down to 0, you will end up leaving part of the side of her, the edges of her body will not move or will not actually puppet warp. So the 2 pixel expansion is the default of this. I've never had a reason to change mine, so for what it's worth. We will talk about pin depth in a little bit. So I'm going to turn off show mesh again. But I really want to bend her arm right now. And the trick to it is you just saw that if I don't, if I'm actually just grabbing on this point and trying to do something, or even if I come back over into here and try and click and do something, I'm going to move her whole body. I don't want to do that part. So I'm going to come up to the very top of my options bar, and all the way over to the right-hand side, you will see there is 3 little icons. One is an icon with a circle going counterclockwise. What that will do is that will get rid of all the points that you have on your puppet warp, but still keep you in the puppet warp space. If you then click on the one that's next to it, the circle with the slash through it, it will get rid of all of your puppet warp points and then return you to normal Photoshop. And then finally, the check mark will actually apply your puppet warp. Because we are working with smart objects, you will keep all of those points, and you can go back into it and adjust it after the fact. I'm going to just hit the icon that's got the counterclockwise arrow in it. It will get rid of all my points, and we'll start this over again. So in order to bend her arm, what I've got to do is I've got to freeze the rest of her body. So to do that, I'm going to start with a point that's right at her elbow, the same place where I want the bend to actually happen. I'm going to click and put a point down right there, and then I'm going to come up to her shoulder, and I'm going to click and put another point there. Then I'm going to come close to her neck and click and put another point there. Then I'm going to put a point right in the center of her forehead. I'm going to put another one at the tip of her chin. And then I'm going to do the other shoulder. I'm going to click and put a point over there, another point down here. I am going to put a final point down in the middle of her hand. And then I'm going to do a set across her waist. I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3. And then finally, I'm going to put a point at her knee, another point at the back of her skirt, and then a point at her ankle, about where her ankle bone would actually be, and then a point at the tip of her toes. So now, hopefully, most of her body is pinned down. You'll still see subtle movements. When we actually go to move this thing, you still might see a subtle movement in the middle of her dress right here. But for the most part, we have anchored this mesh down. And then I'm going to come back over to her left arm, and I'm going to click right at her wrist to actually give me a point. Now, again, because the point that is her wrist has got the blue dot in it, I can actually move it. Everybody else is locked into place. So now when I click on this and move the tool towards, or move this towards her to her dress, you can actually see it starts to put a bend in her arm. Now the bend in her arm, I actually need more points because now she's looking like Gumby, and she would not be Gumby. So I can actually add a point right in the middle between the one that is at her elbow and the one that is at her waist. I'm going to click right there in the middle to add another point. This point will now move. Again, it's the blue dot one. Everybody else is frozen. However, watch what happens to her fingertips because they are not frozen right now. They are going to move. So I'm going to click on this and just try to straighten some of the Gumby part out of her elbow. So that part's actually brought it out a little bit, but you can see, again, it moved her hand so that her hand is not quite in the place that I want it to be. Now, if I want to move her arm even more closer, and I do, again, if I click on the center point and move it, it only is actually going, again, the 2 anchor points are holding it in place. However, if you add your shift key and then click on the point that is at her wrist, both of these are now blue. And now it does not matter which one you click on, you can click and move that and it will move the entire thing relative to the parts that are actually frozen. So this is now touching her skirt right now. And if you take a look close to where her fingertips, you need the fingertips to actually be, you need this close enough that they're actually interacting with the skirt. You'll see that it looks like there's a cutout around it. All of that is it's showing you the expansion. If we go ahead and click on the check mark to accept this, you will see that that goes away. And so now what I've actually done is I've moved her elbow. I've put a complete bend in it. This is a completely different tool than the Liquify tool. Liquify tool, could you do this? Conceivably you could, but it would be really, really, really challenging to do this. Puppet Warp makes this stuff incredibly easy. However, you say to yourself, well, yeah, Versa, that's great, but I really expected her hand to be behind her skirt. We can do that. So if you look at Puppet Warp right now, it is a smart filter. If you come down into your layers palette and double click on Puppet Warp again, it'll take you right back into it. You can see that you've got all of your points again. However, now, if you think about the order that we laid these points down in, the one that was her wrist came really early in the game. The ones that actually came onto her skirt were much later. So these happened after the fact. If we click on the point that is actually just her wrist right here, this is what pin depth is all about. This pin, because it started first, is at the uppermost part. It's on the very top. Every pin that I did after that is lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. We need to change that order. So what I want to do is, instead of picking all the pins over here to say I want them further, I just want to click this one pin and say I want to change its bit depth. I want to make it lower. So if you look at the pin depth option that's sitting up the very top in your options bar, the one that's immediately next to the word pin depth, you'll see there's a little arrow that's pointing up. That's saying that you want to actually bring the pin depth up. In our case, we want to bring it down. It's the icon to the right of that. If you click on that, you'll actually see the tips of her fingers disappear. We still see the very same expansion cutaway line there, but if you click on the check mark there, this actually goes away. So we've actually now put her hand behind her skirt. Which, I don't know about you guys, but that's fucking amazing. I mean, this is just a crazy tool. All right, I'm gonna pause our video right now just for a second, only because you won't be able to see this. So a couple of last things I wanna show you about puppet warping in here. If you double click on the puppet warp again to go back into it, you can actually rotate around points as well. So for me, I want to actually change the angle of her hand in here. So I am going to click this wrist point, but now if you hold down your Option key, you will actually see two things happened really quickly. The first was that you got a circle that went around it really fast, and then the circle actually changed to a pair of scissors. The scissors are how you get rid of points. So if you click, right, I'm just not going to move anything at all. I'm just going to click on this with the scissors. The point goes away. That is the only way. You cannot move. Once you've put a point down, you can't change it to a different place. Because when you move it, you move the whole figure. That's the point of puppet warping. So the only way to actually put a point that is in the wrong spot into the correct spot is you have to get rid of it. So that's what I just did. I clicked on it and I got rid of it. So I'm gonna hit Command Z to go back with that, to bring it back again. So then there was the circle that you saw really briefly. Again, if you hold down your Option key now, you'll see the circle. Then it changes to the scissors. But if you move just slightly away from this, so I'm just moving my cursor slightly away, you get the circle back again. And what the circle is a rotation tool. So what this will allow you to do is rotate the image content around this point. So I'm going to click and drag up like this. Sorry, click and drag up, and I can move it even more behind her skirt, or I can go in the opposite direction right here and move it out. Now you'll see it has an impact on the part of the image that is not frozen in here, but it allows you to actually fine tune this part. So again, if I wanted it to be a little bit more behind her skirt, I could do it like that, or those sorts of things here. And then again, go ahead and say okay to my image, and that's how it would be. Or double click on Puppet Warp, come back in, click on this again, and let's say, well, I really want that on the front of my skirt. So to get it on the front of your skirt, you would actually go up to your pin depth, and you would click on the up arrow now, not the down arrow, to bring it on the front of your skirt now. And then when you click OK, it would actually be on the front part of her skirt. So it gives you an incredible amount of control in here. But now we need to talk about other more practical things about in the retouching part of this. I'm going to come up to her head right here. I'm going to go back into Puppet Warp again. So in all fashion images that you will see, that you've seen for the last decade, for the most part, certainly high-end fashion images that you've seen, everybody's stretched. Every single person is stretched taller. There's just no getting around that. Like freakishly proportionately taller part. And trying to get somebody taller is a really tricky thing. So in Photoshop, not Puppet Warp, but in the regular Photoshop part of it, you can actually do a scale of a figure and you can make it taller. But the problem is that when you do that with scale, you change the scale of, you stretch everything out. So it's not just the legs, it's also the face. And so you end up distorting the face when you do that. So what a lot of people old school used to do is they would do a copy of a figure, they would stretch the body, and then they would take the head on an unstretched version and put that back on top of the stretched out body. It's really long and convoluted. Puppet Warp solves all of these problems. It makes making this figure taller much, much easier. But I'm going to show you two tricks in this in terms about making things taller. The first thing we're going to do is simply make her neck taller. This is another thing people do, is they stretch necks out. So to do that, is zoom into her head. It's more complicated than you would actually think to do this. So when I do this, I need to lift her entire head without distorting it. And you'll see what I mean. If I click on this pin that's right on her chin and just go to lift it up, it just crushes her. It really distorts and crushes her face. I'm not lifting her whole face. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I need to pin the entirety of her head, and then I'm going to select all of her head at once. But because I have all of it pinned, I will not introduce distortion into her face. So to do this, you need to run pins up the side of her cheek, on her ears, in her hair. So I'm just going to go around these on the very top. The little parts that are sitting out, you need to bring the curls with it unless you want those to distort. I'm going to come back down. Now this part's working out pretty good for me. However, you will inadvertently end up introducing distortion in her face. You don't want to do that. So I'm going to put another pin on the sides of her forehead, and then I'm going to put a pin right in the middle of her eyes, and one on the tip of her nose, and one on the bottom of both lips. And then I get this message that comes up, and it says, you cannot add another pin because it's too close to an existing pin. This problem is even worse if you're using fewer points. So if you were in a normal point density, this thing would be, we would have gotten a gazillion of these messages already. Go ahead and you can say okay to that. That's fine. I'm going to see if I can get one at the side of her lip, and the edge of her mouth. It's not going to allow me one there. I'm going to try one sort of in her cheek. I got one there, and I'll try one on the other side. So this is probably pretty good. I think I've got enough, especially you want to get the big features. Like, I'm not so concerned if I get a little bit of distortion in her forehead, but I want to make sure that I don't distort the distance between her lips and her nose and her eyes and her ear, that kind of stuff. So now I have to select all of these because I want to move this all as one. However, I want to also pin down more of the base of her neck. So I'm going to click down here on the bottom of the base of her neck so that when I do this stretch, it will only impact her neck, the stuff that's in between my two sets of points. I'm also going to add a couple of points over to the rest of her shoulder on both sides over in here. And then I'm going to come back. I'm going to click on the point for her chin. Unfortunately, you have to hold down the shift key and select every single point. They don't allow you to. I wish they had a marquee tool that you could just drag across and it would select all these points. It doesn't. So holding down your shift key, you need to select every point that we just stuck down on the bottom of her head. And if you miss one, you're going to introduce distortion wherever you miss one. So again, you're looking for them all to have that little blue dot. So now I've got all the ones right in her mouth too, and her nose. Because again, if you don't, and her other eye, if you don't select those points, they will stay fixed into place and you will just distort everything around them. So all of these now are blue. All the ones that are on her body are not. So then let go of your shift key. It doesn't matter which one of these you click, and just drag straight up and you will actually elongate her neck. Be really careful about how much you do distortions in these. These are really small movements. Really small movements make an enormous bit of difference. So don't go like yanking her head up and giving her a 18-inch neck. It will just look ridiculous. So that's how we make her head taller. If again I click on the check mark to say okay to that, you can still have undo in Photoshop. So if you hit Command Z, it undoes it. Command Z will take it back again. And you can see it does distort her neck, obviously, but her face is not being distorted at all. So she has now got a more elongated neck, a little bit taller. I'm also now going to go after to make her actually her whole body taller. So double click on Puppet Warp again to go back in. This is going to be a little bit simpler to do. You want to actually do this in 2 moves. So I've got her pinned at the waist up at the very top. Her waist is actually pinned. I've got pins down at the bottom. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more so you guys can actually see this. I am going to then pin to bring down. I'm going to put a pin that's right in the middle of the bottom of her skirt. So I do have points that are at her knee, and then I've got another points that are down at her feet. That part's actually working out pretty good for me right now. So I'm going to do this in 2 stages. You can't just make everything longer. What you have to do is you do it in stages. I need to make her thighs slightly longer, and then her shins also slightly longer. So to do that, I've got her waist is actually pinned, as are her hands and her arm. I'm going to click on this pin at the lower part of her hem of her skirt, hold down the shift key and click on the next one and the next one. Actually, I'm going to throw down another pin also right here on the other edge of her skirt, and then hold down the shift key and select all of those. But now you cannot just move that, because if we just move these, it will make her thighs longer, but it makes her shins shorter. I don't want to do that. You need to add the pins that are down at her feet. So click on both of those. Now I've got all the ones on the lower part of the skirt and the ones that are at the very bottom. I'm going to click on her. I'm not going to click on the ankle part. I'm going to actually click on this pin that's right here, and I'm going to drag this down just to make it a little bit longer. Again, a little goes a really long way. And then I need to do the same thing for just the base. So I'm going to, right now, if I click on the pin at her ankle, nothing changes. The rest of these guys turn off. It's still blue. Hold down your shift key and click on the one that's actually at her toe. And then I'm just going to grab the ankle one and pull this down a little bit as well. And again, a little goes a long way. And I'm going to say okay to that. Double click on the hand to kick back out. And this now, again, if you want to see the difference in what we've done, click on the layer mask, not the layer mask, the smart filter mask. If you turn off the puppet warp eyeball, it will turn it off and it'll show you the unwarped version of this. But it involves a lot of processing to do that, because it literally goes back in and it recalculates where all those original points were. If instead you simply invert the mask for this, it's much faster. It doesn't have to, because it's not doing it, it's just hiding the effect. So I'm going to invert my mask, and this is how you actually made her taller, stretched her neck out, and have her scratch her ass. Questions about any of this? So why do we care about doing this like this? I am going to go back and I'm just going to throw this puppet warp away. So just grab the puppet warp smart filter and drag it down to the garbage. It gets rid of it. She goes back to being completely normal. I'm going to turn my background on now. So what I want to show you is the reason that having her completely knocked out is so incredibly powerful for us. I'm going to turn on the background layer right now. I'm going to select the puppet warp figure, the layer that's on the top. I'm going to do a merge stamp version of everything above it. So hold down your Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E, and it will give you a merge stamp version of this one on the very top. And then I'm going to turn this into a smart object. Layer, smart object, convert to smart object. And then again, I'm going to puppet warp this. So I'm going to come into Edit, Puppet Warp. But now look what happens when you turn on your Show Mesh. It covers your entire image. So when you try to move her hand here, it does not work. You will see there is nothing that will allow you to, I can't get, again, I'll do the very same trick we did before. Put the, here, let me actually undo that part really quickly. I'm going to turn off my Show Mesh. I am going to make it more points. I'm going to put a point right at her elbow and then another one. We'll do the exact same thing we did at the very beginning. I'm going to start on the other side. I'm just going to click and put a point at her other wrist and then click and move this. And it looks like she's moving, but look at how it's tearing at her whole body right in here. And the reason it is because you're moving the entire image. It moves the background, it moves everything. So this isn't really an effective way to do compositing work, because it will not help you out at all, because you're distorting and changing everything. Does that make sense to everyone? We good on that part? Questions about Puppet Warp at all? Okie dokie. You can close this up. We're going to come back to it if we have time, but right now, to get out of here, again, I'm just going to click on the circle with the slash through it. It'll get rid of it. I'm going to just park mine. I'm not going to get rid of mine. If we have time, I want to show you how to create artificial backgrounds. But the next thing that I want to do is complex shadows, and this is a biggie. So in doing the complex shadow part, we first need to, again, I'm going to pause the video right now because you won't be able to see this. Okay, so to do this shadow, if you take a look in your week number 10 folder, there is an, above your assignment folder, there's a file called 940copy.psd. That's the one I want you to bring into Photoshop. And it looks basically just like a blue background. If we take a look at, does everybody get this file open? Anybody not? Okay. If we take a look at this to begin with, come over to your layers palette. There is this blue that you're actually looking at it's a photograph of a blue sky. It has been color corrected. I was really into this color. There's a woman who used to shoot for Harper's Bazaar that would do exactly this color sky. And so that's what I wanted my figure to be on. I wanted it to be on this slightly cyanic, not really quite completely real sky, because this is not the true blue of a blue sky. This is far more pastel-like. But anyway, it was the color that I wanted for this. So the color has actually been changed. If you double click on the smart object, you'll see it actually is a raw file. It's just been, the color has been shifted in it. That's the only thing that's going on in here. I'm going to ask you to skip the layer that's right above it. I'll show you what that is in just a second, and then click on the third layer up. If you click on that, you'll actually see that this is, there's parts of it that is real. That is a real blue sky that's behind this right now. And there's a couple of plants out here. The thing that you're looking at right here is a model that's made out of foam core. And the model is about the size of this, about the size of an 8.5 and 11 by sheet of paper. So it's an extremely small model. So this is the rooftop of one of my old houses. I was interested, what I wanted to do is I had these pictures and I wanted to do backgrounds, and I wanted that sort of like classic Santa Fe, New Mexico, white building scenario to actually put these, to put my figures into. So I built this thing out of a piece of foam core. So it's a small model on a piece of foam core. And then I took it up on top of my rooftop to give it real lighting. So this is available light. It's actually sunlight that's actually on this thing. You can see that behind it, there are plants that are sitting on my rooftop. I wanted to get rid of those plants. So that's what this layer mask is all about. If you hold down your shift key and click on the layer mask, it'll get rid of that, and you'll actually see the blue background that's behind it. However, this blue background is solid, and skies are not solid. Skies actually have a gradient to them. So if you now click on the eyeball for the gradient that is between those two layers, you'll actually see it introduces that type of gradient. And so this was exactly what I wanted for my background. There's one last thing that I needed to fix. If you actually zoom into this image, you'll see that you can actually see the edge of the foam core that's been cut. You can actually see it right here. The foam core is only 1/4 of an inch thick, and again, this model is 11 inches tall. So so I wanted to clean that up, and that's what the last of these layers is on. If you click on that layer, you'll see that it actually cleans out that part and gives you a solid line instead of that foam core cut line. If you zoom back out a little bit, what you should now be able to see is that there's a floor ground that's sitting right here in the front. Then there's a wall that's going up as a diagonal, and then there's another like a parapet wall that's actually right behind it, and then there's the sky above it. I'm going to double click on the hand to kick all the way back out again, and then finally at the very top there is a group that's called body. If you click on that, you'll actually see that there is a figure inside of this, and if you click to open it up, again, you can see inside of it that there's a couple of retouch layers. There's a puppet warp layer that's actually in here that stuff has been done with. There's a number of things that are going on in here, but nonetheless, by itself, if you want to see what it looks like without the background, hold down your Option key and click on the eyeball, and you'll see it's just a figure that's now on a completely transparent background. So I'm going to click on that to bring it back on. So I want to actually introduce complex shadows on this person. I want to bring this person in. We're going to do the whole full thing on this to try to match everything that we can match on this. So in looking at this as your very first step, what do you think about this? Anybody see any problems?
There's two different light sources?
There are two different light sources. And can you tell me what direction they are coming from?
One from the left, that's their face, and one from the right, casting that shadow.
Exactly. So if you take a look at the shadow that's on the background right over in here, that shadow can only way that can be coming at this is a light that's on the right side and then is casting the shadow. Otherwise, you would need to have something here on the actual background itself that would be explaining that shadow, that would be creating it, and there's nothing here to explain it. So the light has to be coming from the right-hand side on my background. Where's the light coming from on the girl? So this is something that people struggle with all the time. People look at this and go, well, come on, no, it doesn't look like that. The lights are pretty flat on her face. Don't ever look for the highlights. Look for the shadows. I need everybody to zoom into this girl's legs. Can you tell me what direction the light is now coming from? It couldn't be simpler. There's a whole shadow on this side. The light's got to be coming from the left to the right. Has to be. Again, don't look at faces. This can be really hard to judge direction of light. But if you look at something like this, there is absolutely no question her other leg's doing the same damn thing. So, I've got conflicting light. The light on my background is coming from the right side to the left. The lighting on my figure is coming from the left side to the right. So you need to flip one of them. I'm going to actually flip the girl. So go ahead and select the body layer to make the body group because we're going to transform that. Come up to the edit menu, down to transform, down to flip horizontal, and it'll throw her the other direction. And now I've got shadows that are matching in the same direction. Now, again, we've got color and contrast and saturation. We've got other issues that we've got to figure out and work out, but at least this has gotten it into the lighting is now coming from the same direction. So I'm now going to build a complex shadow. So we need to do this in two different pieces. So we're going to do one piece that runs along the floor, and we're going to do another piece that runs along the back wall. So to do this, we are going to simply load the body as a selection. But first off, I want to be able to manipulate this body around. So I'm going to turn the entire group into a smart object. Again, it still will be a group inside the smart object, inside that protective envelope. It'll still be inside there. We'll be fine with that part. So to do this, again, select your body, come up to layer, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. And you'll see it's just her on a plain background. And then I'm going to load this as a selection. Command click on it, loads it. So this is just the outline of the girl. Then I'm going to click on the top layer of my background. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put my whole background into a group. So let's do that first. Command D to deselect, and then select your entire background. I'm going to select the top layer, the retouch layer. I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom, hold down my shift key and click on the bottom. And then you can either make this a group, or we could turn this also into a smart object if we actually wanted to. So for my group, I'm just going to turn this into a group. Click on the menu that's to the right of the tab for the group layers palette, and come down and do new group from layers, and we'll just call it background. And it's just now in a group. Again, you click it open, you'll see it, group. So now I've got my background and I've got my body. All of our shadows go on top of the background, but underneath the body. Because again, you would never have a shadow on top of the body that was creating the shadow. That would be an impossibility. body, whatever's creating the shadow, that shadow will always be underneath it. So I'm going to click to add a blank layer underneath this, but again, I'm fine here. So I'm going to then again hover over the body, hold down my command key, click to load it as a selection, come back to my layer that's underneath this, and I'm going to fill that with black. Now my foreground and background colors are not defaulted, so I'm going to hit the D key first. Black is now my foreground color, so Option Delete will actually fill that. You can't see it now. I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. You can't see it because it's directly behind the body. But if you turn off the body, you can see that there is now this layer on here that's just completely filled with black, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to duplicate this, Command J. I'm going to double click on the top one, and I'm going to call it Back Shadow. And I'm going to double click on the first one, and I'll call it Floor Shadow. And then I'm going to turn off my eyeball for floor shadow, select my back shadow. I'm going to turn on the eyeball so that I can actually see the figure that I'm working on. Now, at this stage of the game, you want to go to the pasteboard. And the reason we want to be on the pasteboard is that we've got to radically transform these shadows. And when we do a radical transform of the shadow, you want to be able to work with the transform controls that are outside the border of your image. So hit the F key once. It just takes you to the pasteboard so that we can work on it there. And then the first thing I'm going to do is actually move my back shadow. So I've selected the top one, and I simply need to set it on the back wall the way I just showed you guys on my little illustration right over there by the column. So hit the V key to get the move tool, and we're actually going to just click on the second one and click on it, and we're going to bring it back. And what you are trying to do is you're trying to get some sense of the idea of how is this actually interacting. I try to actually imagine the light. I'm also looking at this shadow that's right down here. I'm trying to imagine all of that part and try to figure out about where she should be on that background. But remember, this does not get angled. This actually stays completely upright, vertical, just like the figure is vertical. This doesn't get twisted. It doesn't go to the side. The shadow that joins her definitely does, but this part does not. So I'm trying to get some idea. Does that seem about right? I'm going to pull it in just a little bit more here. Does that seem about right? And that I feel reasonably good about this. So one thing, if you want yours to be similar to mine, that you should be able to see is if you zoom in on this and take a look at the line where this back wall actually meets the floor right here, you do not want her body to be covering that part. That would be too low. So you want it up a little bit so that some of her legs are actually on that background part. So this is where I'm going to actually leave mine, is like this. Now, it's in the right spot. However, you would not see this part of her shadow on the floor. That is a completely different shadow. If you take a look at your channels palette, you will see I've already made masks for you to use. So if you scroll to the bottom of your channels palette, there is a channel in here called Back Wall. You need to command click to load back wall as a selection. And then on your back shadow right here, you're simply going to add a layer mask. And you'll see it just chops it off at her legs so that it's on the back wall now, but it's not on the floor at all. Is everybody good on this? Okay. I'm going to double click the hand to kick back out here just a little bit. So now we actually need to bring in the shadow for the floor part. So to do that, before I actually do that, I am going to go ahead and build the layer mask for this. So to do that, if you hover again over this back shadow, at the very bottom, the back wall, hold down your command key and click to load this as a selection, and then add this to the floor shadow as a mask. It needs to be inverted because right now, if you turn it on, you'll actually see, it'll actually be visible. I need it not to show on the back wall. I need it to show on the floor only. So you need to invert this mask, Command I. And then finally, we are going to move the shadow radically. I don't want the mask to move at all. So you need to click on the link between the layer mask of the floor shadow and the figure. Click on that link to break it. because now I can actually work with the shadow. I can move the shadow all around, but the only place I will be able to see it is the floor. I will not be able to see it on that back wall because that back wall is actually covered. You'll see it's masked out. So I'm going to click on my shadow, the pixel content of my shadow right now, and I'm going to transform this, Command T. So when you do this, if you actually come up now and you rotate it, you can see that the shadow rotates around this anchor point that's right near her crotch. That's not what I want to do. I mean, eventually I can get this to work, but you want to keep the number of movements here to at the absolute minimum. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, I'm going to drag this anchor point and I'm going to put it right down between her toes. So I'm going to bring it all the way down here to the middle of her feet, because now when I do the rotation, it will anchor the shadow of her shoes to this spot, and then the rest of it will just flop over onto my background. So now when I actually do my rotation, you'll see that it actually comes down, and you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get the legs to sort of begin to sort of match up. But the only thing that you're going to see in here now, because of the way I've got this set up, is the shadow part that's actually on the ground. So once I get here, you can tell I need to really transform this significantly. So I'm going to start off with compressing it from we'll take a look up in the screen that I'm talking about. This is really the side of the shadow. I need to narrow this down. The problem that we've got is that the shadow on this, no matter how much we trick this out, the light is coming from the side of her, and the shadow that I've got is the full figure of her. It would never be that way. This would be actually much thinner. So I'm going to click on this control handle that's in the middle. If you hold down your Option key, remember when we were transforming the gradient shadows, the circles, if you hold down the Option key, it will then in effect control both of the handles and bring in the width together at the same time. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click and drag this in to sort of bring this part in again, and then I'm going to, sorry, that actually moved my anchor point, rotate it a little bit more. I'm going to hold down my Option key and compress this even more, rotate my option a little bit more, and I'm beginning to get close on this, so I'm going to continue to bring it in. You don't need to worry if the whole thing matches up or not here, because we can actually go in and take care of parts of that. But I do need to move in here and make sure that I'm not screwing something up. So when I look at the shadow that's down here, the anchor point, it's too far forward. It's not coming off of her feet. I need to push the whole thing slightly towards the back of her feet. So I'm just going to click in the middle and kick this slightly back, and that's a little bit better now. And then I'm going to take a look at this area that's up here in the front. Again, I can actually crank this down a little bit so that I'm getting the line. What I'm looking for is to get this edge as close as I can on this side. And then again, I want to move in this other side a little bit more. So I don't want to bring them both in together at the same time. I'm just going to move this outside shadow part in. So I'm grabbing the top control handle up here and just kicking this over a little bit more, so that now I've actually got, it's close to the outside line on both of these are actually connected from the top to the bottom. Again, it's not perfectly done in the middle. I'm okay with that part here, but this part is actually getting pretty close to me right here. So I'm gonna double click on my hand to kick back out to see that's actually committed my shadow, committed my transform. So hopefully I'm happy with this part. And then taking a look at this part, and it actually does look pretty good here. So I've got problems with this that I've got to fix, but they're not too bad. So this is actually my situation right here. Questions about this so far? Okay, the one thing that I'm getting off of this that I'm feeling like right here is to really make this part a little bit more believable. I feel like the shadow that's on her body that's on the background is not quite right. I feel like the shadow that's on the background needs to be distorted. It also needs to be crushed in a little bit. Again, because you would not be seeing the entire face of her. You would actually be seeing more of a side shadow on her. So I'm going to break the chain link for the back wall shadow. So I'm clicking on the chain link to break them. I'm going to click on the figure that's on the background now so that I can distort that. Command T to bring up the dialog box, and then I'm going to crush this slightly. So again, holding down my Option key, I'm going to push this in a little bit so it's not quite as deluxe as it was before. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to try to get, again, the center edges now to line up with this. So I'm going to kick that over a little bit, crush it in just a little bit more. So instead of doing the outsides, I'm going to do the insides. And I'm going to say OK to that. And double click on the hand to kick back out. So yeah, it's just a little bit more distorted. It's not looking like it's perfectly like a silhouette of her. So that part's actually working for me. I think that's a better call in here. However, the problem that I've got now is that her the shadows on the floor don't match the shadows of her legs. So I need to actually fix this part. The easiest way to do that is going to be with the pen tool. So you can see I've got to actually fix this floor shadow. This is the part that I need that is showing that I need to actually hide on here. So I am going to grab the pen tool, the P key, and I'm going to click on the point right where these two meet. So it's the wall shadow where it's actually meeting the floor shadow. I'm going to put a point right down there, and then I'm simply going to come down here to about her knee area, and I'm going to click and just put a small bend in there. Remember, there are very few perfectly straight lines in nature, so that'll actually give me this line, and then I'm going to come all the way back around and complete this path. I'm going to go to my path palette, double click on work path, and I'm going to call this left leg and say OK. And then I'm going to load this as a selection. Command click. This is now I've got the marching ants on this. I need to soften this just slightly up to the select menu. Again, we did this. This is the third or fourth time we've done this, guys. So this should be getting to be familiar to you now. Up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and I'm going to put in a half a pixel, 0.5. My shadow's still now really sharp. I've got to soften it up in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that, and then go back to my layers palette. This is on my layer mask. I need to hide this part. Again, this is shadow. This makes no sense. I need to hide this part of the shadow that I've just pen tooled out. So on my layer mask, I need to fill this with black. Black will actually hide this. Black is my foreground color. Option delete, and it goes away. Command D to deselect. I need to do that now on the other side as well. So again, still with my pen tool, I'm going to click on the point where the two intersect, and then I'm going to come way down here, and again, put a on the edge of it, put a slight bend in it, bring this all the way back around, complete the path, go to my path palette. It is now called work path. Double click on it and call it right leg, and say OK. Command click to load that as a selection. Up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. A half a pixel is fine. Back into my layer palette on the floor shadow, working on my layer mask. Again, I want to hide this area. I don't want to see that. So on my layer mask, I'm going to fill this with black. Black is my foreground color. Option delete, Command D to deselect. Now the last thing that we've got going on in here is you'll actually see there is a small white line right between these two, right between the floor and the background. That's because my layer mask, again, what I did was, it's the same layer mask. One is just inverted from the other. So you actually have a single pixel where the mask edge is actually delineated, where that selection actually happens. We need to fix that. So to do this, again, I'm going to double click on the hand, make sure that I'm happy with everything else. I want to check her feet again. You want to make sure that this is coming off the right spot. This actually is coming off the right spot. It needs to be added. There needs to be slightly a little bit more. You can see just on my screen, this contact shadow for her foot right here would actually start more underneath this shoe over here, and there's a small little white spot back in there. All of that needs to be filled in, but I can do all of that when I combine these two shadows, because I need to bring both of these things ultimately together as one. So to bring them ultimately together as one, turn off your body. So turn off the eyeball for your body. Select the top layer. You also want to turn off the eyeball for the background. You want just the shadows showing on a transparent background. Make sure that you've got the top ones selected, and then we are going to merge them into one single layer. Hold down Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. It will merge them into one, and I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to call this Complete Shadow. And then I'm going to turn off the two that actually created it, turn the body back on and the background back on, and then go in and clean up these shadows. So I'm going to zoom into the area where the two of them actually meet right here, and you can see that white line right there. We're just going to paint this in. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure that it is a completely hard brush so that we don't spray outside of it. A normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Make it a very small brush. And then just paint through that line. Do the same thing on the other side. And then finally, down in here, there's a spot right between her feet that we need to do, and then there's also a spot right there where the contact shadow would be all the way connected. So this is the beginning of it all, but this is not the end of it all by any means. I actually now need to do all sorts of things to actually change this part to give me the effect that I was showing you guys before. Remember, I've got two things that are happening here. One is I need to actually make this shadow sharper at her feet and softer at the background. And then two, I also need it to fade slightly from the area that's next to her feet to the background. I need to do both of those things. So the first thing that I'm actually going to do is turn this into a smart object, because I want to make sure that I can use my blurring as a smart filter as opposed to being destructive on this. So I am going to, actually I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this first. I'm going to treat this complete shadow as a new version. So I'm going to double click on it and rename this NV, new version complete shadow. Be nice if I could type. Oh shit. And then duplicate it, Command J. That way if I screw something up here in the smart object part, I don't need to worry about it. I'm going to turn off the new version of this and go back. I'll leave that as just copy, and I'm going to convert that to a smart object. Up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. So this is a smart object right now, so I can't introduce the blur part of it. That's relatively simple to do. So I'm going to zoom in on this. We are going to blur it, so this is my complete shadow. So I'm going to come up to the filter menu, down to blur. Now, a lot of people will use a Gaussian blur on this. I find the most successful one for shadows is actually motion blur. So I'm going to click on motion blur instead. And then when motion blur comes up, really crank your distance up a lot. You'll see a big blur if you'll do it. It's just so you can see the blur. What ends up happening is that this angle here controls the direction of the blur. And I've always found that doing stuff across the shadow, left to right, ends up being more successful looking than it does up and down. You can change the angle. If you change it till it points straight up and down, you'll see that the shadow now is going up and down. I'm going to keep mine going straight across her body. So down to 0 degrees, or close to it. And then it's nowhere near this much distance. I'm going to crank this back off. And what I'm trying to do is look at the shadow that exists. This edge that's right here on this back one, that's a real shadow. I'm trying to mimic that edge. How soft is that edge? And you can see, I'm looking at these both now at the same thing. A distance of 17 pixels is too strong. So I'm going to keep bringing this down a little bit till it actually looks like the one that I'm looking at on the wall over there. And I would say probably somewhere 8, 9, 10 starts to look pretty close. Yeah, that actually seems pretty close to me. So this whole image now has got that on it. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. Remember now, because it's a smart object, this is a smart layer, and you have a smart filter, not a smart layer. It's a smart filter, and you have a smart filter mask on it. So now we can actually control where this blur happens. So the blur actually goes at the bottom of her feet. It should be very sharp, and then the complete blur in the background. So with the layer mask, the smart filter mask selected, hit the gradient tool, the G key. With the gradient tool selected, go up to the top of your options bar at the top. We do want this to, if you click on your drop down, to be a classic gradient, not a regular gradient. In the drop down box to the right of that, in the basics bar, open this up. We are going to do this on the first of the two gradients, foreground to background color, not foreground to transparency, but foreground to background. That will be black to white. And then in the type of gradient that we want to pull this as a linear gradient. That's the one that's the first of the icons to the left of that. Click on that. And now when we drag from the front to the back, this is starting with black, my foreground color. If this mask is hiding this part, then the area of the shadow at her feet will be hidden, and therefore they will be sharp. And then if I get to the background in the back here and I don't do anything in the background in the back, that will actually be soft. So I'm going to click right by her feet and drag back. And then I'm going to stop when I get to the back wall. You don't want to get any more to the back wall, because otherwise it will start to affect the shadow that's on the back wall part, and let go. And then if you zoom in, you can see that it did exactly what I wanted it to do. The area that's by her feet is very sharp. As I start to move back, it starts to get softer, but it's doing it as a gradient. Now, I actually think that some of the feet right here need to have a little bit of blur in it. The contact shadow that's right underneath her feet, that needs to be tack sharp, as does this area that's right here. So I started my gradient right here on the edge of her feet. I'm going to actually re-pull it, and I'm going to start it a little bit further back so that I get a little softening on this part of her shoes. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that gradient, and then I'm going to pull it a second time. And again, I'm just going to start here a little bit further back by the front of her feet, click and drag back like that and let go. And then see what that does. And yeah, it puts a little bit of softer edge on this front part, on the part as it's moving back, and then it just goes back gradual to the whole back of her feet. So I think this part's actually working out pretty well for me. I like the way this one actually looks. So that's the softness for me. However, I want to be able to control this in terms of the density of all of this. So I need to actually match the shadow that's now on this background with the real shadow that's happening in place in my scene, the stuff that I actually pulled in. So to do that part, we actually need to build this as a curve. You don't use, a lot of people will actually use black like this, and then they will simply drop the opacity of this. That is not how shadows work. What this is doing is this is actually giving you a color of gray, and even though you might think that shadows are gray, shadows typically have color in them. And this is also an opacity change, so that's also not how shadows work. The way shadows work is that they actually take the highlights of your image and they remove them, and they continue to remove them till the only thing that is left is the shadows. That is a very different way that's a different process than it is just to drop the opacity of this. So dropping the opacity is not going to help me out. So I'm going to drag the opacity all the way back up again. However, I want to create a layer mask of this, and the problem that I've got is if I load my selection, so if I hover over this complex shadow smart object and I load this as a selection, command click, this will not have that gradient built into it because the gradient is a mask that's outside of this. So instead what you do is hit Command D to deselect. You need to make this a smart object in a smart object. I need to re-nest this. So to do that, hover over, make sure that you've got your new shadow copy selected. we're just going to make it another smart object. So up to the, again, the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to convert smart object. And now you'll see that all of that got pulled into it. So now when I look at it, I've still got my soft edge, but this is what the whole thing looks like. There's no mask in here. So now if I hit Command click to load this as a selection, this is going to load that gradient of softness, that gradient of blur in here. So Command click to load that as a selection, and then we are going to add this as a curve. So I'm going to click on adjustment layer, and I'm simply going to add a curve onto this. Now we need to make sure that we kept that softness in here. To do that, hold down your Option key and click on the mask so that you can view it. And you can see I've got a soft edge here, but then when I'm looking down at here, this is very sharp by her feet. So this mask is done correctly. It's got a gradient of softness that actually happens in it that is exactly what I'm trying to emulate based on what I was looking at right over there when we did the chapstick with the flashlight. All right. So at this stage of the game, I'm getting close. I can turn off the complete shadow. First off, I've got color sampler points here. You may not, so I'm gonna just do these from scratch. I'm gonna click on the eyedropper tool and come down to the color sampler tool. And then I'm going to clear all. I'm gonna reset my color sample size to 3x3. Remember, we changed that earlier. And then I'm going to put one sample point right on the new shadow, and then another one on the, I'm going to do it on the flat plane of the real shadow that's in my image. So that's sort of it's not the stuff that's on the floor. It's not the stuff that's actually on the upper wall. It's the stuff it's the flatter part of the wall. It's just more similar to the surface that I'm actually doing this on. Okay. So then I can turn off the smart object that I used to actually create that layer mask, and you see it completely goes away. And then I've got my readouts that are sitting up right here at the very top. My number 1 point, this is the shadow that I'm trying to create. My number 2 point is the real one. So what I want to do is these second values of my number 1 point need to equal the first values of my number 2 point. That's why you always do the thing that you're going to change is where you put your point first, and then the thing that you want to change it to, the source, is where you point your second point, so that these two sets of values in here need to equal one another. So then with my curve selected, not the mask, but the curve selected, I'm going to come up to the very top, the white point slider of the entire RGB group, and I'm going to start to pull the slider down. This is what I meant by how shadows really work. I am now taking my shadows in this curve are all still there together. What I'm doing is I'm removing the highlights. So this actually works the way real shadows ultimately work. And so I'm going to bring this down till I reach the highest point of any value over here. My red channel is at a 158, my green is a 153, and my blue is a 149. So I'm going to bring all three of them down to read 158 because that's the highest value of my destination. So I'm going to keep coming down till I get to 158. It should be 158 on everyone. If you can't get to that 158 exactly, I've got a 159. You can actually use your up and down arrow key to actually tap, and you'll be able to get to that 158. So the red channels are now matching. I need to now match the green and the blue as well. So I'm going to click on my drop-down menu and come down to the green. And with the green, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm at a 158 here. It needs to be a 153. So it needs to come down just a little baby bit. And then finally, the blue is at a 157. It needs to be a 149. Again, go to the arrow keys. It'll drop it in. So now the after values of my shadow here are matching the exact same values of the shadow that's actually over here. I do still have that blur part that's actually working in there, and this part's actually working really well for me now. So then finally, on top of all of this, if we wanted to do, in this case, I don't know that there's much of a fall off in terms of the gradient of the brightness. because the space that I'm in is this huge white space. So this isn't like a situation when we were here in a dark room and the gradient was falling back. So for my money, I'm going to actually leave this exactly where it is right now. But what I can't leave as it is right now is, does this figure still then match the whole rest of my scene? So to do that, the final step that we're going to do on this is we're going to click on the body image on the very top, and I'm going to run my check layers on this to see if I can't get this figure to seem like it's more believable in the space of this image. So over to your actions palette, you need to find your check layer action group, click on the check layers, click on run. Again, it makes everything, weird color. So over in your check layers, turn off the check layer group that's changing the color. We're going to start with our luminosity check layer. And when I'm looking at this luminosity check layer right now, again, the biggest problem I have with this is that her outfit is just way too fucking dark. It's way too contrasty. It would never, ever, ever be this contrasty. Imagine, she's completely surrounded by white. You would have all this light bouncing into every single one of these. So the first thing I need to do is lift those shadows. So I'm going to click on my body. Remember, the way you lift shadows is not using a curve, but is actually using the Smart Filter adjustment filter. So again, select the body, come up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to shadows and highlights. And right off the bat, it's going to lift all of the shadows, and that looks like a pretty good lift to me, if you want to know the truth. It's the way I would actually imagine this thing to be. Now, we are going to turn off, again, it's a smart filter, so I can go back in and adjust this after the fact, but I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this, and then I'm going to turn this off, the luminosity check layer, and see if I don't believe this more. I do believe this more. I do think that that's actually what this thing would look like. It's looking awfully gray, which is probably, maybe this is a little too much. So if you feel like we've opened it up too much, don't be fooled by her face yet. Don't be fooled by that part. That part we haven't matched yet. But double click on the shadows and highlights to open it back up, and then just drop this down to 30 and see if you feel better about it, and close it up again. And that feels a little bit more like it. But again, this is the way I feel like this image part should actually be looking in all of this. I actually think her face in here should be a little bit brighter. It should be a little bit hotter. So if you double click on the highlights and shadow part again, you can actually change the highlights as well. So if you grab the highlight slider and you start to push it forward, you'll see this is actually knocking her out. So I'm not going to do that part. I'm actually going to have to hit her face using either a curve or the camera raw filter. That's actually the way I think I'm going to start this. So I'm going to hit OK on this. Again, guys, I'm winging this right now with you guys. So if you see me like going back and forth and changing my mind, that's exactly the way I would normally do this. The first thing that I need to do here is not to lift these highlights and shadows. So I'm going to temporarily turn them off. The first thing I'm going to do is actually hit her face harder with a little bit more exposure. Now, we could put a curve on this, but the problem in doing a curve on this is that it doesn't lift the entire exposure the way it would be if you had a camera and you were actually opening up the aperture of your camera. If you had a camera, it would lift everything equally. The amount of light that's hitting her body, her dark part of her body, the darkness of her, all of that would be lifted equally. You can't do that really with a curve and not have it. If you try to do it with a curve, you end up killing the contrast. However, you can do it with the camera raw filter, and that's how I'm going to go after this. So I'm temporarily going to turn off the eyeball for my shadows, my lift of my shadows, because I want to get the highlights of her face set correctly first. So I've just turned it off. It's still there. I'm going to turn it back on in just a second, but I'm going to come up now to my filter menu and come down to camera raw filter. And I'm going to hit this again. I can't see this in the context of the rest of my image, but I can always go back into it and change it. So I'm going to hit this with an extra half a stop. So I'm going to just push it up a half a stop and say okay. And now I'm looking at this, and this feels slightly better to this scene that I'm imagining. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, that feels more like doesn't that seem more like bright sunlight on her in this space? Right? It might be a little too much. I'm going to zoom in on this, on her face really quickly. I'm going to hover over the highlight that's right on her forehead, and you can actually see that my R channel is reading 255. What should my R channel be reading? No. Again, this is my check exposure. When I'm doing exposure and I'm using my color checker, I can do a second check by looking at the highlight on Caucasian skin, the R channel only. What should the range of that R be in this image? 225 to 245. This is now reading 255. It is too blown out. So I'm going to double click on my camera raw filter, and I'm going to pull this down to only a quarter of a stop over and say okay. Look at that same highlight again at my reading now. I'm still getting a 255 in here. I'm going to look at the highlight on the bridge of her nose. That's still, again, I'm looking at my R channel only. It is still too hot. Double click on this again, crank this back down even more. Come down to a quarter of a stop, so like a 0.15, a 0.10. We'll see how that looks. And it's still nuking out here. It's reading now in the bridge of her nose like a 248, a 247. I'm going to leave this part here. I don't want to blow it out more than that. But again, the difference in these two here, you can see it's a slight little bump in that, but it actually helps brighten that face and make it that believable. I'm going to turn on then my shadows and highlights again now. They are also being hit by that. They're a little too open up now. So I'm going to double click on my shadows and highlights and pull this down to a 25 and say okay. And I'm feeling pretty good about this now. Again, if you invert the layer mask on all this, it'll turn all of that off. Look at the difference in this. There's no way that this is bright sunlight in a room that's in a setting that is completely white. There is no way that that outfit would be that dark. Impossible. So again, this is actually feeling much closer to the way this ultimately should be. But now we need to look at color and saturation as well. So I'm going to turn on my color check layers here to see how this is. And you can see the vast majority of my image is actually blue except for these shadows. So the image is actually a little bit too warm. So now I've got a choice. And this matters. When I think about, I'm going to turn this off temporarily. When I think about available light, daylight, that kind of stuff, whatever here, I do not typically think of figures as being colder. I think of them as always being warmer. The sun is probably, given my shadow that I've put in here, it's probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the summertime. Again, sun's higher, so that's my guess is that's about the time of day. However, if I turn this on, I have the option, if I want my subject to actually match my background, I've got to make it bluer, and I don't think that's really the case. Instead, I'm going to actually make my background warmer. So to do that, scroll to the bottom of your layer stack, click on your background layer. We're simply going to put an adjustment layer on top of that. It will only impact my background. It will not impact the rest of my, the figure will actually stay the same. So with my background layer selected, I'm going to click on add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a color balance layer. I'm going to change, you don't need to clip this because the only thing that is underneath it is the background. You do need to change the blending mode though from normal down to color. And then again, I've got a dominantly blue background that I want to be warmer. So I'm going to click on my blue background slider and start to drag the yellow slider towards the left. And you can see right off the bat, I don't want the blue sky to be blue, or I mean to be changed dramatically because it's a blue sky. But I do want my surround, my background to actually change dramatically. And I've pulled this in. If you want the same value that I've got on here, I've got a -19 on mine. And this now matches my background is dominantly yellow and oranges, and so is my figure. So I'm going to then turn off my color check layers and see if I like this better. I'm going to come down to the bottom and turn this color balance on and off. And I actually think that that's done a spanky job of all of this. And then finally, I'm going to do a saturation check. click on your saturation check layer, and you can actually see that the figure itself is it's probably very close to matching the sky in the background. There is no saturation in my scene. My scene is white. There is no, gray has zero saturation in it by definition. So I'm going to leave this where it is right now. Turn my saturation check layer off. And this is my composite. Look where we came from. Questions about this? No reason to save your work other than to be able to return to it again if you want to. So I'm going to do a save as, and we will drop that into my TOS folder and say okay. Guys, this is the holy grail though here. I mean, come on. Again, people look at this, especially because of the complexity of it all. They won't hesitate to believe this. Okay. We can close this one up. To get back to the stoplight version of this, hit the F key one more time, a second time, and you can actually close this up. So the next thing that I want to get to is changing color. So to do that, first off, I need to actually give you guys something. And I also need to figure out, I don't remember actually how to add these guys really quickly. So I want to just, so if you come into your student folder, files number 10, Photoshop itself, who in here has never heard of Pantone? Pantone color. Okay, Pantone is like the people, if you do a Google search right now for Pantone, they are the people who define color for the majority of the world, certainly here in the United States. So all color, so inks for printing presses are all Pantone defined color. So if you think of something like, if you go to like Home Depot, they have, color swatches for all the paints. That's what Pantone does, but it does it for the whole world, and it does it in 1,000 different ways. So it will do it for paint, it will do it for dyes, it does it for inks, it does it for, you can't imagine. So everybody, when they try to talk about color, refers to it as Pantone color, as definitions of Pantone color. Photoshop used to support that completely. They quit supporting it in 2001. However, I've been doing Photoshop long enough that I've got old versions of Photoshop, and I can go in and grab the Pantone color libraries out of my old versions of Photoshop, and you can actually put them into your current brand new version of Photoshop right now. But to do that, you need to follow the instructions. So if you look in your Student 10 folder, there is a Pantone Color Books 2021. If you open that up or look inside that folder, there is another folder at the very top that says this is how to install these libraries. So if we actually take a look at the beginning here, this will talk about how you locate the files. I've already located them for you, and I've given them to you so you can pass through the top part of all of this. But this is, say what?
In week 10.
It's in week 10.
I don't see it.
You guys don't have it? Oh, shit. Oh, wait. Try week 1. Inside week 1, go inside your student folder and look inside the software installers. And that's where they are. Sorry. The same thing exists in there. So this is where you guys are going to get these from. So for the Macintosh people, the Macintosh people, this is where you're going to actually try to find this. You need to place these copy folders into the Applications folder, inside of Photoshop, inside of Presets, inside of Color Books. Depending, again, Photoshop may have changed some of this right now. Depending on the install, it could be in Applications, Adobe Photoshop. Again, this will be the version number of the current presets in your Color Books. And so, yeah, hopefully that's gonna work in this. So to get to that, go to your application folder. Inside your application folder, find, most of you are working, I am also working in Photoshop 2026. click inside the presets right here, and then there should be a color books folder. And this is where you want to copy those. Do not place them all in there because you want to keep copies of this for yourself. So again, in your folder, Class 1, Students, Software, open up the Pantone color books, select them all, and then drag them to this folder, and then before you let go, hold down your Option key, and you will get a little plus. And what that'll do is it will make copies of these. It'll save. It won't. Otherwise, you're just going to move them out of there, and you will lose them in this part up in here. So that's where the Mac people put it. For the Windows people, you actually go to your. You need to find this folder, the program files, Adobe Photoshop, preset color books, and you need to do the same thing. You need to drag those same color books that are in your session number 1 inside of this color books folder. You might even in Photoshop be able to do a search in your search bar for color books. For Windows people, color books, but can the Windows people find theirs? You good? Was there color books in there?
I haven't tried it because I don't have Microsoft Word, so it's not letting me open it up.
Okay, well, we'll figure out what you need to do later on. Okay.
It's not showing. My Adobe Photoshop folder is empty.
Windows or Mac?
Windows.
So, Zayden, how did you found yours, right?
On Windows, yeah.
Yeah.
Once I get to Adobe Photoshop, it doesn't show the presets. Maybe because they have the beta version.
Oh, it may definitely because you have the beta version. Do you have a regular version as well? Oh, you can run both at the same time. So you don't need to worry about this right now because the instructions are right here. And then but if it stays in beta forever, you may not be able to get these. Which just means, again, you can go back and forth between both versions. You can actually have them both running at the same time. So load the latest version of Photoshop, the regular version, and see if that's got a place and you can load these. But again, the stuff that we're doing here, guys, this is really edgy stuff. So this is not something you're going to need to do every single day. Okay, good chance that you're also going to have to quit Photoshop and restart it in order for it to actually see those things. So mine are already installed. I don't need to quit and install mine. So really quickly, do a restart of your Photoshop. And then we are going to do, though I will say this, you can still do the color, the whole thing that we're doing, you can still do. You're just going to use a different color library. Okay, so it's not like this is the technique I'm going to show you right now is still valid. Okay, so if we go back into our session number 10, what we're going to do is we are going to actually change the color of, well, this is how you change the color of anything. So if we come down and you look at, there is, I just want to point this out. There's a PDF in here called Recoloring Fabric. It is a recipe. It's a recipe from a very old Photoshop book that you cannot get anymore. So I always go by this recipe. I'm going to show you how to use it, but I don't memorize this stuff. I just follow this recipe. But let me ask you this. How many people in here could actually recolor a black shirt white? That's where we're going to start. So to do this, I want you to open up, if you look inside your week 10 files, there is a file called Shirt Dark version 2, if you can open that up into Photoshop. So basically what I want to do is I want to make this a white shirt. Now, I ask students of this all the time, how would you make this a white shirt? And one student said to me, oh, we'll just invert the file. And I was just like, well, yeah, that sort of makes it a white shirt, but it's the negative of a white, it's not like really a white shirt, right? So anyway, that was a joke. Apparently not a very funny one. Hang on one second. I need to find my recipe for this because I'm just going to follow it, but I'm going to walk you guys through this as well. Okay. So first things first. So we want to actually make this shirt not only white, we're going to do a range of colors of this shirt as well. So to start off, the first thing you need to do is you need to change the color space that we are in. You need to change this from an RGB color space to an LAB space. Anytime you are doing wholesale, global, serious color correction like this, you want to work in LAB. You remember the very first day we got together and we converted the red car to green, and I showed you guys how to do this in LAB, and it was just like instantaneous, and it looked really good compared to all of the hue saturation abortions that you guys had created. So first move is to make this an LAB file. Up to the image menu, down to mode, down to LAB. You won't see a whole lot, you don't see anything change on the image, but if you take a look now over at your channels palette, you'll see that your composite channel is an LAB, then you have a lightness channel, an A channel, and a B channel. You also notice that you've got some pre-built masks in here just to save us time. So that was our first move in doing all of this. I've got those all the way I want them. So then we're going to come over to your layers palette over here right now, and we are going to make a copy of your background layer. Command J, and then we're actually going to add a group on top of this, just a blank empty group. If you go to the bottom of your layers palette, there's an icon that looks like a file folder. Click on that and double click then on the group name, and you're going to rename this white shirt. And then finally, you're going to grab this layer number 1 and you are going to drag it into that group. And when you get it in the group, you'll see it shifts over slightly to the right. And then I want you to double click on this layer number 1, and I want you to call it DSAT1. DSAT is short for desaturation. And then we are going to desaturate it. So with this layer active, come up to the image menu again, down to adjustments, and then down to desaturate. You won't really see much of a change because it's essentially, it was a black and white image. It's a black and white shirt regardless. So you're not going to see a big shift in it. But this is now, if you look at your values in your RGB info palette readout, they will all be exactly the same no matter where you are in here, because this is truly a black and white image. And then you're going to make 2 copies of this. Command J, Command J. I'm going to double click on the second one, the one called DSAT copy 1, DSAT 1 copy, and make it DSAT 2. And then finally the one at the very top and make it DSAT 3. Then turn off the eyeball for DSAT 2 and 3 and select DSAT 1. And then finally, we need to put a layer mask on this because I only want to change the fabric. So if you come over to your channels palette, there is a pre-made channel called shirt. If you just hover over the thumbnail, don't pick it, just hover over the thumbnail, hold down the command key and click. You will load it as a selection, and then come over to your white shirt group. We're not going to add it to the layers, we're going to add it to the group because that will control all the layers that are inside of it. So then simply add a layer mask. So you should now have a group that's got a layer mask on it called white shirt, and then 3 layers that are on the inside, and only the one at the very bottom is actually got its eyeball on, and then you're going to select it to make it active. Is everybody good on this part so far? Yes.
Could you do it one more time? Or how did you select it?
How did I select what?
You said
The layer mat to make the mask. Just hover over the thumbnail of shirt, hold down the command key and click on it. You should get marching ants. Come over and select your group, the thing that looks like a folder, and then just click on Add Layer Mask. You good? Yeah. Okay. So again, come down to DSAT 1 to select it. Then we are going to add a solid color adjustment layer above this. So click on the adjustment layer, again, the icon that's half black and half white, the circle, and we're going to add a solid color. and I want you to type in this value. So click on your RGB. We're going to still put in the values in RGB, even though this is an LED image. It doesn't matter. Type in 240 for the red, hit the tab key, 240 for the green, tab key, and 240 for the blue. So I've made a very light gray is what I've actually made in here. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then finally, you are going to change the blending mode of this solid color from normal down to hard light. And this is your white shirt. However, what the problem with this is that we're lacking in all of this is that it's lacking contrast. I don't have enough contrast in here. That's where your other two DSAT layers come in. Click on the eyeball for DSAT 2, select DSAT 2, and change its blending mode from normal down to overlay. That builds contrast in here. If you need more contrast in here, that's what DSAT 3 is all about. Click on its eyeball to turn it on, click on it to make it active, come up to your blending mode, change it from normal down to overlay. Now, if you feel like this is too strong, you can actually change its opacity. You can just slide the opacity back down on this to actually change it. I think the contrast is correct. What's not correct about this is the color that we actually put into this. So go back to your solid adjustment, your solid, solid color adjustment layer, double click on it, and we're gonna bump this up. We're gonna take it up to 250, 250, and 250. And say okay to that. White shirt. I'm telling you, you whip this out at an interview for a retouching job and people will be down on their knees begging you to come work for them for a lot of money. So this is a pretty cute little trick right here. However, I want to show you what the whole Pantone thing was about. So we're going to then collapse the white shirt version of this. We're going to make a duplicate of the whole group, Command J. And we are going to, I'm not going to rename this right now because we need to pick the Pantone color that we're actually going to use for it first in order to actually do this. So, and also I keep a handy pad and paper right next to me so that I can copy down LAB values, and you'll see why in just a second. So we're going to open up this second group right now. So I'm going to turn off the eyeball for the first group. I'm opening up the second group right now. I'm going to turn off all the DSAT layers, so all of those are turned off. I'm going to double click on my solid color layer, and then to get to the color libraries, it's this, you'll see right above the LAB readout is a thing that says color libraries. If you click on that, you will get a drop-down menu, and these are all the color libraries that you've got. So the people that did load theirs should have Pantone starting with their solid coated. There's also solid uncoated. These are the two most famous of the Pantone swatch books. So what they are basically talking about now is uncoated stock and coated stock. So again, the paper, the kind of paper that they actually go on to. So it's important if somebody gives you a Pantone color that you know whether it's coated or uncoated. They will actually tell you that. So again, we are going to work in the solid coated stock of this. So go ahead and pick solid coated, and you will see that this entire column up here is a set of all of the Pantone colors, and you can also see their readouts right here. So this color that I've gotten, it may be different than yours, don't worry, we're going to pick a common one for all of us. But this color right here, this is a Pantone 7541C, that stands for coated stock. So I'm going to pick something that's more in the yellows and orange ranges, or maybe something that's down in the, I'm going to go back into the yellow ranges. We're going to make a yellow range. So in order for you guys to get here really quickly, if you actually just come up here, I've got a Pantone. Mine's going to be a 395C. That's the color that I'm going to try to imitate. If I start somewhere else in this Pantone book and I just do a 395 really quickly, it will pick the 395 for you. So you want to just type in 395. It will actually pick this color for you. And then what you need to do is, before we do anything else, you actually need to write down the LAB values of this. So the L value of this is an 89. I will read them out to you, is an 89. The A is actually a negative 14. Remember, in LAB, instead of 0 to 255, you have a minus 127 to a positive 128 for both the yellow blue axis and the green magenta axis. Yes?
Here's a question. Is it depending on which computer you're looking at on, or should all the values be the same?
If you've got a 395 selected, do you have your 395 selected?
Yeah, and it says like, so I'm just one off from you, so it's like 90, negative 13, 85.
Oh, are you in the coded or the uncoded version?
Solid coded.
Huh, that's weird.
And I've noticed that in like other like lessons that like in previous, that, like some of the values were like just like one off. And I was like, maybe it's because of the systems.
Are you in 16-bit or 8-bit?
8.
Okay. And you're in Adobe RGB for your working space? Click on the thing at the very bottom and come down to Document Profile, and you should have LEB written there instead of something else. We'll take a look. You're going to be awfully close regardless. So anyway, a minus 14, that's a negative, and then my B channel is an 89. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. But again, I feel like I need contrast in here, so I'm going to turn on my DSAT 1. That will actually build in contrast for me now, possibly a little bit too much. So I'm going to back off on the, no, I'm not going to back off on that. That's actually not my DSAT 1. The DSAT 2. This is my contrast boosting layer. I'm going to just back off the contrast on that just a little bit. But now to check to make sure that your color is exactly the color that you think it is supposed to be, we actually need to put a color sampler point right in the middle of this shirt. So I'm going to come up to my color sampler tool. I'm going to drop a point right in the middle of my shirt, and you can see I am I'm a 76 in the L, a minus 14, and a 88 here. My color is close, but my L is completely off. So on top of this DSAT 2, I'm going to add a regular curve. And with this curve on here, my lightness channel, it's not a composite. It is just the L channel. You've got the L channel and the A and the B. I'm going to click on the targeting adjustment tool. That's the little double-handed arrow. I'm going to come over and click right on this point, and this is reading a 76. It should be an 89. So I'm going to click and drag this up until I get the 89 readout in my info palette. And then my A channel was a minus 14, and then my B, which it is, so I don't need to change any of that. My B is an 88. It was supposed to be an 89. So I'm going to do the same thing and click and drag this up slightly. And now I'm going to rename this group 395C, because that is exactly what it is. So why does this matter to you? Why would I bother to tell you all of this? So I've come to you. I'm a shirt manufacturer. I've got 100 shirts. They're all identical, but it's 100 different colors. And I want you to shoot it. What will you charge me? Well, let's work it out. To think about this, so in order to do a shirt, how many can I really do in a day? Now, the shirt actually has to be put on a pin board. So it's a piece of foam core, and they pin it out. It's actually set at a diagonal on a wall so that you can approach it flat on, so that you don't have to try to stand on the top of it to shoot down. The first off is that I need stylist and a stylist assistant, because all of the shirts have to be prepped. They've got to be steamed out. The collars and the cuffs need to be ironed. Then I actually need to get it on the pin board. It needs to be styled. I need to get it on my set. I have to photograph it, so I need an assistant and a digital tech to do that. How many of those can I do in a day? 25. And that's a lot. That's a hard day, right? So that'll take me 4 days to do that. So my rate to do that in Chicago would be $3,500 a day. If it was in New York, it would be $5,000. So if we do 4 days at $5,000, that's 20 grand. Then I need my digital tech at $500 a pop and an assistant close to that. So that's going to be, again, the both of them together. Let's just call it $1,000. So that's $4,000 for them. Do the same thing for the stylist and the stylist assistant. So now I'm at 30 grand. I need to rent the studio for 4 days, $1,200 a day. That's another 6 grand. So now I'm at, I was at 30 and now at 36. I'm climbing close to 40. Right? You need catering, you need lunch, you need all of that kind of stuff, right? So it's going to be the 40 or 50 grand doing that, right? So I bid this at $40,000 or $50,000, and they say, okay, fine. They ship me all the shirts, and so I get all the shirts in. I book all of my crew for a half a day. I come in, I do one shirt, and then I hand my digital tech all the Pantone colors that the other shirts are supposed to be, and he can knock that out in a day, and I still bill for $40,000. So now I'm getting $40,000 for the job because you don't bill by time. I keep telling you guys this. This billing by time shit is killing you people. You bill by the job. I quoted 40 grand to do this. Here it is. Job's done. Give me my money. If I can do it in a half a day, why not? You can do this shit all day long. Right? Let's do another one just for fun. So again, we're going to close up this layer, the group, make a copy of it, Command J, open it up. We're going to actually change the color for all the people who don't have the color that they can do here. We'll do a different library. So double click on the solid color adjustment layer, open this up. I'm going to actually go back to the picker. So this is opening up into the Pantone color part. I'm going to go back to the picker part of this. Click on color libraries again. Click on this drop-down menu and let's go to full color tone. This is actually what Europe uses a lot, and you'll see it'll pick a color that's close by this, but we'll change it. I'm going to actually do a pink shirt, so something a little bit more in here. So yeah, I'm going to do this full color tone 1026. So actually pick the 1026. Again, in this case right now, I'm getting a CMYK readout here because they don't give me colors. This particular color library is not giving me the lab values. But if you click on color picker, it will actually take you back into the color picker and you get the LAB colors right here. So this new one, let me click on that library again. I forgot to write down what it was. So it's a 1026. And so then again, back to my color picker, it's an L of 79, A of a positive 31, and a B of a -5. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. And then again, in my curve up in here, I'm going to double click on my curve. First off, I'm going to turn off my DSAT 1 to see if I feel like I need the saturation in here. I mean the contrast in here. I feel like I need some of the contrast, but I feel like that's too much of it. So I'm just going to select the contrast and really crank down the opacity part. Yeah, so I'm down around a 35 if you want the same as mine. That seems a little bit better. 30, somewhere in that range in here. I'm going to click then on my curve right here. I've still got my readouts that are right here and my LAB. I'm going to reset my curve by just clicking on the custom drop-down preset and going all the way up to default. It just zeroes everything out. And then again, with my lightness channel, I'm going to grab my targeting adjustment tool. I've still got my 1 point right here. Click on your targeting adjustment tool, and I want 79 for the lightness channel. So click, I'm at a 59 right now. I need to push this up to a 79. Then go to my A channel, is supposed to be a positive 31. This is really close, it's a 30. And just tap it up 1. Oh, sorry. Targeting adjustment tool. And then the B channel is supposed to be a -5, which it is. That's the second one. How many of these can you do in an hour? We just did that in 5 minutes. 5 minutes into an hour, 12 an hour, right? So I've got 100 to do. That's basically 8. Yeah, 8.5 hours. No, that's 8.5 hours to actually do that. So I'm going to pay my digital tech an extra day. So instead of me making $40,000, I'll make 39. Questions about this? So this doesn't just work for fabric. This works for cars. This works for hair. This works for skin. This works for shoes. This works for walls. This works for floors. This works for skies. This works for anything. You'll never change color any other way again. Are we good on this part? Okay, so for today, the final assignment, sorry guys, we went over just a little bit. We didn't need to do that extra one. But if you take a look again in your session number 10, in your assignment folder, I'm going to give you a quick hint about how this is. So if you take a look at the assignment, it says right here that inside, when you look inside this, there's a file that's got a bathing suit that's got a lot of wrinkles in it. You are to smooth the swimsuit wrinkles completely out. So if we take a look at this, open up this folder here, I'm going to give you 2 hints. The first hint is this. There's more than one raw file in here for a reason. The second hint is this. The one that you're going to actually fix is this 059. So again, I'm going to just open mine so I can show it to you really quickly. See all these wrinkles? You're supposed to get rid of all of that. So the first thing is there's more than one raw file in here. The second thing in here is the most successful versions of this involve Puppet Warp. I'll see you guys next week. Did everybody get on the sign-in sheet? That's right there.